to order the meeting. Can we start with the Pledge of Allegiance? Would Paul Friedeborn be willing to lead us this evening?
Sure. Put your hand on your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Paul. Gina, can I get a roll call?
Director Avila? Absent. Director Jenner?
Here.
Director Freeman? Here. Vice Chair Gray?
Here.
Chair O'Brien is absent, and Vice Chair Gray will be acting chair tonight.
That takes us to item number 3, agenda review.
Chair, staff has no recommended changes. I just note that we will be having a closed session after our new business items this evening.
Okay, thank you. Item number 4, public statements for items that are not on the agenda. Are there any members of the audience this evening that would like to make a public statement for items not on the agenda? We have one so far.
Chair, I also see Doug Manforth on Zoom when we get to that.
I apologize for butchering this name. Please correct me. Modi Balyan?
Yes, sir.
It says you want to speak on the golf course?
Yeah,
Is that for an item not on the agenda?
I think so. I didn't see the agenda yet, just I came for the meeting.
Okay. We're discussing budget items that
Yeah,
could
if he
relate
wants
to the
to.
golf course.
I
he
think
wants to
it
make-
will be related to that.
I'm sorry.
Whatever he can do it now, or you can have him wait until
I
later.
can wait.
You can wait?
Sure.
It might be a long time, you might want to do it now.
Sure. Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Moti Balyan, and I'm a resident of this Simi Valley since 2005. And thank you for giving me opportunity. And I want to speak on behalf of all the kids, those are high school team. My son is playing golf in Simi Hill since I think he was in probably elementary school. Now, every time, I don't know how many people you play golf and how much you pay, I don't know. But for the kids, I'm paying a ridiculous amount of fees. And all the golf players, those who are in high school team, they are paying such a high price, full price, because my son is minor, so I don't want to leave him alone. If I go with him, then I have to pay $18 as a spectator fees. And on top of that, then if I get a card, then I have to pay for the card. So it's very hard for the kids to, first of all, they hardly have any time because of the APs and all the courses, because they are brilliant students. And on top of, when they come for the practice, it's so expensive, and plus the golf course is so packed, you can see the numbers. And I spoke to Mr. Bryan several times, but they say they can't do anything, because that's the rate, leave it or take it. And if they want to practice on the range to hit the ball, one ball is 50% off, after that they have to pay the full prices. And by working so hard, and how much, if I bring my son, if you see his hand, how much he practice, how many ball he hit in a day, he has so much calluses that he is unable to hold golf course sometime. But I want to make him that he's from Simi Valley. And it's not that other players. Monday was the CIF game in Thousand Oak. Simi Valley Schools Club, my son, he shot 69. They were on top. They have lost one game because they practice so hard. I was thinking that these recreation team is to help the parents, help the student, so we can come out, we can create pro, we can create nice golfer, we can create a good image. But with that rate, paying $100, paying $50, $60 on top of that card fees, paying for the balls, and every day, how it's possible? I think you should make it like other places. Give them a membership of $10, $20 a month. They can play, they can hit the ball, they can do so many things. And look how excited they will be. Now, parents have fear, kids have fear that how much money they have to spend. My son golf, I made him a card. It's in the cash with the cashier. Ask how much bill he has every month. And it's not my son alone. It's all the team from Sindhi High School, all the team from Royal High School, all the teams for the golf course. So I think Simi Valley can afford to give the break to these kids. That's what my request. And if you have any question, please let me know.
Dan?
Chair, if I could, and my understanding is that we had quite a few reduced fees for our high school golf teams and our younger youth, particularly the golf teams. So I'll have to follow up with Mr. Reed, and I'll work together, and I'll have to analyze and kind of look into the different costs you're talking about.
Sir, I don't want you to kick the can down the street, that you will investigate, you will work with them. Make a concrete decision, give the kids break, make a membership for $20 a month so they can play whenever they want. They ask them to come after 5 o'clock. Now it's a day, but in the winter, 5 o'clock gets so dark, how you can allow? And then if I go with my kid, I have to pay $18 spectator fees.
I understand, sir.
Yeah.
So I need to evaluate that.
Yeah. Mr. Bond, thank you for sharing. Unfortunately, each speaker is limited to 3 minutes.
Thank you so
Can you
much.
exceed that?
Absolutely.
Feel free to reach out to any of us on the board, but our general manager and Mr. Reed are excellent. If you have any concerns about the conversation, please talk to them, reach out to us. We're happy to keep talking. But because it's not an item on the agenda,
Yeah.
we can't discuss the topic to any great extent.
I absolutely agree. I came to this meeting because I left message to each and every board member and I did not get a phone call back. That's the reason today I made a decision that I should approach, otherwise I should be in San Diego to a family event. Somebody passed away. But I canceled that because I didn't get any phone call written from iGoogle. I pick all 3 names. I left messages. Nobody called me back.
Well, I apologize. I've never seen any message, but I'm happy to speak to you this evening later on. Or if you want to talk to our general manager or Mr. Reed, they can make sure we do get those messages.
I'll wait.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other public statements for items not on the agenda?
Yeah, I can help.
I think that's Mr. Bamforth. Go ahead. Mr. Bamforth, did you want to make a public statement?
Yes, I would just ask the board to consider adding into the budget the 2 items that I had mentioned for park ranger safety at the last meeting, the thermal and the tasers. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to make a public statement for items not on the agenda? I am seeing none. That takes us to number 5, the consent agenda.
Chair, I apologize for interrupting you. For public comments, Dan, when you do that evaluation, I'd ask you include spectator fees. I want to know a little bit more about that. And then the other part was distinction between when athletes are practicing as a part of a team versus when athletes are going on their own outside for extra practice. To our speaker, thanks for coming out tonight, and tell your son he earned those calluses. Those don't come easy. And then for our other speaker, Douglas Bamforth, you mentioned the equipment. I did ask when we review at a future meeting, I didn't say which particular meeting, we'll go over like what do officers commonly carry the Rangers and what should they carry.
Thank you. Item number 5, the consent agenda. Are there any board members who would like to pull anything off of the agenda and discuss it?
I'll second that.
Roll call.
Director Avila is absent. Director Dennert?
Yes.
Director Freeman? Yes. Vice Chair Gray?
Aye.
And Chair O'Brien is absent, and the motion carries with a unanimous vote.
Thank you.
That takes us to item 6, new business. Fiscal year 2022 and 2023 budget workshop.
Thank you, Chair. I'll provide the report this evening. Each year, this is kind of the kickoff of our budget process with the board. We have several subsequent evenings to actually adopt the preliminary budget, 2 public hearings in July and August, and then also an adoption of the final budget, which usually occurs in late September, early October. So this is the beginning of the process. I did want to acknowledge all of our staff here this evening. A good chunk of your management staff, so they're here to answer any of your questions and hear your direction to us for fiscal matters for the upcoming year, or at least begin that discussion. Normally, not normally, but prior years, we've normally ran this meeting as kind of around the table, kind of a workshop style. But because of COVID and the need to have visibility on television or on Zoom, we've been kind of forced to do it in the more formal style. So that being said, what I'd like to recommend, board, is that I will work through the budget, and I think if it's okay with the board, we'll answer questions as we go through the slides. So if you have any questions on a particular slide or presentation point, we'll take those questions. And then at the end of the presentation, I have some policy considerations or things we can go through, kind of decision-making and direction to staff. So if it's okay with the board, we'll follow that format.
Elaine, Brian, you okay with that format?
Any questions as we go, and then decision-making at the end?
That works for me.
Okay.
Let's do that.
All right. All right, so just an outline of what we're going to talk about this evening. We'll get through it relatively quickly. Policy considerations, I'm going to let you know what direction we're looking for from the board. We're going to talk a little bit about the longer-term financial sustainability of the district, some projections, general fund balancing summary. That's where I'm going to propose to the board the district recommended budget from the staff. We'll briefly go through all of the funds that we have. We'll do a review of capital projects that are recommended for appropriation in the budget. I'll give you some other information related to and that impact the budget and things we need to be thinking about going forward, and then we'll finish the item with some direction from the board. Just as we go through, I want to let you know what kind of direction we'll be looking for. One is on the general fund preliminary balancing recommendations. We're not voting on the budget tonight. We'll be doing that in June, but some consensus acknowledgement that those look good, or you want changes to it, or things that you might want to see modified, and then we can bring that back to you in your final budget in June. We're going to review, there's some direction we need in the assessment fund. We're in an imbalanced situation in our assessment fund, so we'll dive into that a little bit. Capital project recommendations, just want some acknowledgement that the preliminary budget looks good for capital projects. I do want to spend a little bit more time on golf capital. Your staff has spent some time and thought into putting together a 5-year golf capital plan budget, a little bit more thoughtful and detailed manner this year. And then I wanted to just have some discussion about a few items, capital related items that are listed there. And then if there's any items that the board would like to propose or any changes, that would be the time to do that as well. We'll come back to that list after we go through the budget. So this is our 5-year general fund forecast. It's a forecast of revenues and expenditures. So what we do is we take our major revenue categories, we look at the historical revenue that we've received, the actual revenue, and then we take a look at the economic climate and looking forward, things we know about revenue, and we try to project out in detail what we expect to receive in revenue for the next 5 years. We do the same on the expenditure side as we take a look at all of our expense line items, different categories that we know are increasing at different rates, insurances, healthcare, those kind of things, and we project that out for 5 years. I would say that this projection is somewhere between realistic and probably pessimistic, so it's a conservative projection, which is usually what you want to do when you do projections. So on the expense side, it's probably probably realistic, and on the revenue side, it's probably a little pessimistic, and I can explain that a little bit more. But the major takeaway from this slide is our average rate of revenue growth over the next 5 years, if you look, kind of aggregate all of it, is about 2.8%, and then that's the resulting revenue over the next 5 years, depending on the category. On the expense side of the budget, the projected 5-year rate of growth is about 4.7%. So as the board can see, the rate of revenue, the rate of expenditure growth is outpacing the rate of revenue growth. What happens is, if you see the preliminary budget here, we're balanced, or a little bit more than balanced. But when you get revenue growth that doesn't keep pace with the expenditure growth, you have a growing imbalance. So the green line represents that growing imbalance. So as we go, just looking forward, we're looking at slowly going into more of an imbalance in the general fund over the next 5 years, unless we take corrective actions. There's multitudes of ways. When we get to those years, we will definitely balance the budget. You can see this year's proposed budget to you is balanced. So when we get to those years, we'll take actions to balance the budget. However, in the bigger picture, there's a trend here where we are facing a potential imbalance in the general fund unless we take some corrective actions either on the revenue side or the expense side to bring those things more into line. So I can answer any questions you might have on that at this time.
Dan, my experience has been that's for government standard operating procedure. If they look at the long term, they're going to either have to raise revenues or cut spending. If they, most cities or special districts looking forward, they realize, oh, we got to control spending. Would you say that's what we're currently facing too? Like, is there dramatic decisions that you anticipate?
So just like any business or a government, you want to do these things with a long-term outlook. So when you say dramatic, if we do it in all of 1 year, say year 3 or year 4 of this, it could be dramatic. The more responsible way to do it is to phase it or do it so it's not as dramatic, so it's more gradual. So it depends on what approach we take to the corrective action. So if you start to plan for it, say in year 1 of this forecast, and make some corrective action in year 1, then that corrective action carries over to year 2, year 3, and year 4, and year 5. So if you kind of gradually take the corrective action, it's not dramatic. However, if you wait and don't take the corrective action in year 1 or 2 or 3, then you get to year 4 and it has to be more dramatic. So I would say depends on the approach. My recommendation is that we do it in a more less dramatic fashion, and we do it in a calculated, gradual way to ensure that we keep pace. On the expense side of the budget, the reason why that's growing so high, those are costs largely out of our control, just like anything else. We've got water costs are going up at 6% a year. We've got our insurance costs are going up at 20% a year at this point. For this year, it's 20% a year. I've got a projection in here that it's going to go up to 10. Electrical costs are going up. So most of the costs on the expense side we are the recipient of bills, let's say, and we don't have a whole lot of control over what those bills are. What we do have control over is how we pay the bills, but most of the stuff on the expense budget is things that services we use, costs we use, water supplies. We all know construction costs are really high and all of that stuff. So
What I'm getting at is, if somebody heard there's going to be a deficit, I would say that the key phrase there, if the park district takes no action.
correct.
So we have a whole range of actions that we are most likely going to take, whether it's
Correct.
making our programs more popular and bringing in revenue or cutting
Yeah.
spending.
This is typical, especially in an environment where you have, the cost of living and all of those, consumer prices. But this is an apples to apple. So this is just if we continue doing business as we are now and we didn't make any changes. However, the board always makes those changes and we always develop a balanced budget. Now those changes may be cuts on the expense side, reduced staffing levels, reduced levels of service, or it may be decisions on fees, say on the revenue side. But as we go through this, we do always end up with a balanced budget. This is just a portrayal. If we continued business as usual, this is what we would be headed toward without corrective
And
action.
then I want to know more about those rising insurance costs, but does that come up later? Like the causes of them?
Yeah, we can do it later or now. Yeah, let's talk about it later. There's a slide in here where we're talking about some of those things. We can do it then. Any other questions on kind of our long-term sustainability? The takeaway here is, expenses are growing faster than revenue. So we need to consider that and do something about it over the next couple of years.
And just verifying, I'm assuming we also have a slide on water costs?
I don't have a slide in here, but that is another thing this night. If you want us to gather information and bring that back to you at a subsequent board meeting, we can take that direction as well.
I think we've generally covered water costs and some of the options that the board has some consensus around. I just wanted to ask if any of that would be presented this evening. Or
I have the cost, I don't have the rate of increase, so I can show you the cost history of water if you'd like.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
What about our fuel costs? I haven't heard anything on that.
Yep, fuel costs are way up. I can show you that in the budget, what our estimated actual is against this year's budget. So the cost of fuel, understandably, is very high. I can show you our actual. So I've got fuel and water we can take a look at. Any other questions on the forecast? Any other? Director Freeman asked that we bring this information back as a part of the workshop. I'm not going to go through all the line items. These documents are in your package. So there's a lot of detail here, but we're kind of following along with what's in your budget package. So the takeaway here is that the state and other folks have taken money from us, basically. So over the years, as they have shortfalls in their budget situations, they make adjustments to the revenue we get from various areas, and I'm going to explain what those are, which means that it then gets diverted for park district purposes and it goes to whatever purpose that may be. Two of the items I wanted to point your attention to, and I'll start with ERAF. So in the early 90s, the state had budget trouble, and they have a minimum funding requirement to fund schools in the state of California. At the time the state was in budget, they were tight in the early 90s. What they did was they had to meet the minimum funding requirement for schools, but they didn't have the money. So what they did is they took money out of other folks' property tax and they shifted it to the state budget so that they could meet the minimum for schools. So this is a running total since 1992 of how much that diversion has resulted in. If you look at the current year, if ERAF did not exist, we would have $2.9 million more of operating budget in our property taxes. We get $2.9 million more in property tax. The state started this saying that it was a temporary diversion, and that when their budget got better, that they would return this to us in the form of property tax. I think Elaine and others in the room may have more history to this, but over a course of a number of years and figuring out that it wasn't temporary, that I think that was the impetus for the assessment. So basically, I believe the board at the time thought we need to replace the revenue that was taken from us, and we were forced to generate the revenue locally, which is the assessment kind of filled the gap for the loss in the ERAF revenue. So that is the foundation of why we're kind of, I don't want to say forced, but why the board made the decision to go for the assessment was to make up for the lost property tax through the ERAF shift. Another one that I want to point to, which has been somewhat corrected, but redevelopment agencies. So redevelopment agencies don't exist anymore, but for a number of years they did. That was the same concept, was property tax was taken off the top of the amount that we receive as a park district. It was diverted for redevelopment and blighted areas, so that was put into projects. And then we were supposed to get the money back when those properties developed and the value of those properties and the tax went up. Well, the amount that was diverted was always more than the amount that we received back because of higher property values. So for a whole number of years, in addition through ERAF and through the assessment, we were, I kind of take up to, let's see here, 2009-10, we were losing about $674,000 of property tax to RDA agencies. They eliminated RDAs in 2010, and we're starting to get some of that property tax back. Today it's down to about a net what we were before, so that was a loss that goes back in time, but that since they eliminated redevelopment, we don't have that loss anymore. So it's kind of a little bit of history of how we ended up with the assessment district and why we chose to do that, and about our property tax revenue.
Elaine, who would you give credit to for bringing up the assessment as a way of replacing that money?
Well, I think it's interesting to understand too that this prompted actually the assessment. Because the district not only was losing money through ERAF, but also through the redevelopment agency. And they had to come up with a plan to backfill so that the district would remain whole or in good standing. I will say though that there's a lot of talk where it'll go, I don't know, about ERAF in Sacramento. And maybe its time has come to take another look at it. And most people that are working in Sacramento now don't know what ERAF is. State treasurer did not know what ERAF was when asked about it. And so that's because it's been around forever and it was established and it's drawing money in each county. And it'll take a while, I think, to address the issue because so many agencies are affected, plus the school district now are well funded, but they probably will not be comfortable having the ERAF money taken away from them. So, I mean, it's not going to be a simple solution to get our money back or to get rid of ERAF altogether.
Any other questions, board members, on the ERAF? Okay. Director Avila at a previous meeting had asked me to, or asked staff to estimate that we implemented the rates for Strathern, basically weddings, and at the golf course that we approved this year. Had we done that earlier in time, how much revenue would have been realized because of that? So the top section there kind of takes our usage patterns. You can see that the revenue at Strathern was pretty low because of COVID. But we kind of took the usage patterns at Strathern and applied the current rates to the previous fiscal years, and the additional revenue that would have been realized is identified there in the additional revenue line item by fiscal year. We did the same with golf and kind of estimated what, based on usage levels, that's really high because the golf course was really popular during COVID. You can see that number's kind of decreasing at this point. But all that being said, that also we always need to note that that assumes the same level of usage. So with the new prices, would we have the same number of users? Maybe, maybe not. So anyhow, that's informational for the board to take a peek at there. Any questions on that?
I don't, but I know that as the speaker earlier asked some questions, we'll revisit that in the near future, or you'll get back to them.
Yeah, Brian and I will get together and have a discussion about that and get back with the gentleman. Need to understand a little bit more about what the issue is, but certainly, yeah. Apologize here, this thing is on a bit of a delay, so when I hit the button, gotta be patient. So this slide is a high-level summary that explains the changes from the current year budget to the proposed budget. So in the top area here, under proposed 22-23, you can see up here, so the revenue budget for 2021, can you guys see that? Yeah, so this column right here, the current revenue budget is 27.4 million. And then what we do is we make adjustments to the current budget through projections and figuring out our revenues. And this is your proposed recommended 22-23 budget. So those are the adjustment amounts that we've made to the various line items on the revenue to build your 22-23 revenue budget. And then you can see which is ongoing revenue and which is one-time revenue. This chart shows what your 22, 21, 22 expenditure budget is. We do make adjustments to the base budget for additional costs, so cost of water, cost of insurance, all those things are added into the base budget because there's not really a whole lot of policy discretion there. I would note that this number is growing quite a bit because we are experiencing a rebound from COVID. So this expenditure budget, the big chunk of the 1.6 million is because we've increased our revenue and our expenses because we're opening for COVID. And then what we do is after we balance the base budget, or after we adjust the base budget for current year numbers, it's kind of apples to apples. We kind of say, okay, well, how much is left for other things? So in the recommendation here, we are not recommending any new additional ongoing costs in the budget because our budget, that's an indication that our budget is very tight, and a lot of the expenses are spoken for in your base budget. So we're not recommending that we add any ongoing expenses to the budget for 22-23 as compared to 2021 or 21-22. We do have some one-time funding that is available for things that need to be done around the district. Most of this is directed at replacement stuff. So even though it says new, some of this is new and some of it is replacing old stuff. So this is a list of items here that we're recommending. One of the items is a limited term community outreach position. As the board is aware, if we do community outreach and promotions, it helps on the revenue side because we can get more people using our classes, doing more rentals. That in turn results in additional revenue, which then helps us with our imbalance. So the more revenue we get by people using our stuff, it helps us be sustainable to continue our levels of service. The idea behind this position is we really think that if we up our game, and we've been talking with the board about this for a while, if we really do a better job at marketing and outreach, we think that it will result in additional revenue, and we think this investment will pay for itself, if not more. So we're recommending that we try that. It is in here as a limited term proposal, so it will be a position that's used for a period of time, probably 24 to 36 months. If we're not seeing the results we hope to see on the revenue side in terms of it paying it for itself, we will not utilize the position anymore, but it's something I think we should try, and I think it'll help toward our long-term financial sustainability.
And just for the record, this is in addition to our maintenance list.
Yes, I'm going to get to this. So this is in addition to what I have in the capital budget for deferred maintenance, correct? We're addressing deferred maintenance, which we'll talk about more. So these items are kind of base budget items that we're using general fund balance, not capital funds. We're using general fund balance money to purchase and replace some items. I'm just going to go new tables for the Guardian Center. Since we moved in here, we don't have a good setup for folks to use the building. New replacement kiln at the senior center, new movie projector for movies in the parks. We have one. It's about 18 years old, I believe, so it's time to get a new one. New banquet tables for the center, new scoreboards for the activity center, new gym wall pads at the center, new flooring in the recreation room at the center. The center needs a new ceiling. There's in the multi-purpose room, the ceiling needs to be repaired and fixed. Acoustic panels. I've got a budgeted item here, not sure if we're going to actually do this or not, but we've got to take a look at the flooring at the Oak Park Community Center. The staff tells me that we might need to redo the flooring in the Buena Vista room there. So we're budgeting this. Don't know if we'll actually replace the flooring, but we have funding in case we decide to do that. There's funding recommended in here for what's called a laser level. So this is a quality of service and an efficiency. This is an expensive piece of equipment. So this is basically an electronic laser. I don't know what to call it. I guess it's electronic. It's a self-survey machine. So rather than you see the folks out on the street surveying different things with the pylons and the orange cones and the coat, this equipment allows you to do that type of work, but without the labor and the people to do it. So we have laser leveling needs in our fields, in our soccer fields, and most of the infields. If we have this piece of equipment, we can keep up on that every year. The guys can roll that out when they need it and make sure that the quality of our fields and our different turf areas and that are done, and we can keep the quality of service up. The golf course does have one. They use it a lot, and it's somewhat inefficient for us to drag it back and forth. The guys ensure me that if we get this piece of equipment, our fields will be top-notch every year. So that's what they've said. And then there's a wall at Strathern that we put out of this funding source to repair at the Adobes. Anyhow, that's kind of the summary of your base budget and new items recommended in the budget. Like I said, there's no new ongoing cost recommended this year.
Dan, I know that it's, we're just discussing tonight, but the laser leveler, I'd like to know more about the efficiency part. Like, if we could share and save money, that obviously sounds good. So we're saving significant staff time, not driving back and forth.
Yeah, now's the appropriate time, so I'll have any of the staff, Wayne or anybody that wants to get into the efficiencies of the laser level and why it makes sense for us to get it for.
To restate my question, it sounds like redundancy because we have one, but I'm listening to find out more if it's going to help us out a lot because they don't have to drive back and forth borrowing.
Yeah, Dan's description of the laser level was a little broad. The laser level hooks onto the back end of a tractor, and what it does is it automatically goes up and down with the Gannon to level out the infields and ball fields. Right now, we're guessing at it. We borrow the golf courses from time to time. Last year, we had a little incident with it that I won't mention here, but to pick it up and transfer it back and forth does take a lot of time. If we had one on staff, the 3 supervisors, no matter if it's Oak Park, West, or East group, can just pick it up and use it when they're doing their renovations. It'd be much more efficient than asking the golf course, well, they're using it, can we borrow it for 2 weeks? For $30,000, we've rented laser levels in the past. They cost about $3,000 to rent for a week. This will pay for itself.
How many years do you expect we'll probably be able to use it for?
Well, with our mechanics and the way we keep our cars maintained, I expect this thing to last 20 years.
That's it.
I mean, you were right, I was rough on the description of it, so it's actually a tool that attaches to the tractor that these guys have access to whenever they need it. So difficult to do by going over at the golf course. Any other questions on the general balancing and again, just questions now, we'll come back at the end and make some decisions.
Dan, coming back at the end, is that when you anticipate making more of a decision on the community outreach?
Yeah, if you have questions now, but at the end, I'm going to kind of ask you, do you guys support what's on this list of recommended budget adjustments? So you guys can give me direction on that, yeah.
I'm good.
So yeah, I'll be coming back on the policy and kind of revisiting the decision points in this, which that will be at that point. Just real quickly, this is in your, not meant to be read on the screen here. This is just kind of a photo of the revenue that's in your preliminary budget, that's in your packet. I'm not going to go through all the detail, but you kind of, this is your 22-23 proposed. It gives you our actuals from 21-22, our approved budget from 21-22, our projected actual for 21-22, and then what's proposed for 22-23. I'll give you a few minutes to kind of look through that in your budget. You can see, for example, let's take rec program Simi Valley actuals. This is COVID, $993,000 in rec program revenue. We approved a budget of 3.4. We actually built a negative in the budget of 1.1 right there. So the approved budget for rec revenue was about 2.3 million, and we're going to actually get 2.2. Next year we're projecting 3.4 million in revenue. So just an example line item of how that works, and it also is representative of COVID and then us getting back to normal. So, any questions on the proposed revenue budget? I'll give you a few minutes to peek through that.
Are they picking up at Oak Park, user fees?
Usage?
Rental?
Yes, rental usage is really high across the district. Some of the programming is still has some ways to go, particularly in the after-school club and some of the senior programming, but the rentals are doing very well right now. Yeah. In both areas of the district. Any questions on revenue? This is a summary of expenditures. So looking across the top at total, we look at operating versus capital. We want to be very, very careful about making sure that your ongoing revenue only pays for ongoing things and vice versa. So you can see off the top our total recommended or operating budget expenditures are actual in 2021 in the general fund was 16.2. We approved 18.9. Our estimated actual is 18.2. So right there you can see our expenditure budget's 18.9, but we're projecting to end the year at 18.2. That's an estimate, could be more or less. So that's a reflection of your staff doing a great job during COVID, doing their jobs and doing it at less of a cost. And then our projection for 22-23 on expenditures is 20.6 million. And then you got the breakdown on salaries and benefits, supplies, and then that item down below is capital outlay issues and stuff that we'll go through on down further in the presentation. In the general fund, we do have designated reserves. So a major portion of that is cash flow. So because we only get property tax 2 times a year in December and April, we have to keep a cash reserve for cash flow because our revenue only comes in. So between those times we get the revenue, our cash flow really dips. So we keep a lot of the designated reserve for cash flow, about 6 million of it. And then there's amount in there for reserves to guard against any COVID. So if the COVID gets worse next winter and we don't meet our revenue and expenditure numbers, I've got some emergency number reserved here, one-time money to get us through any bumps in the roads regarding COVID as we move forward.
Yeah, and I appreciate that because I know it's a guessing game, but if we didn't prepare for it, that'd be bad.
Right, so it's a belts and suspenders, so we do conservative budgeting. We budget conservatively, but we always have a plan in case that something doesn't go according to plan. So that's what we have built in this budget. So I would note that in your budget packet, there's detailed line items of every category of spending. So like salaries, this is a roll-up summary of that in your budget packet, and it's available online. You got every line item for what we spend in these line items. Now might be a good time to talk about, Miguel, I don't have the detailed expenditure budget in here, do I? Do I have the detail? I do?
Yeah.
No. In the PowerPoint?
Oh, it's in the packet.
I want to answer the questions about fuel and about
Insurance.
water. Yeah, let me find that for you real quick. So fuel in the general fund. Find it here. Let's just add it. Give me a second. This is not in the PowerPoint, but it's in your packet. Looking for fuel, Miguel?
Yes.
Oh yeah, I got it. Okay. So in the general fund, fuel, 2021, we spent $156,000 on fuel. We're talking gasoline and that kind of stuff. We budgeted $150,000 for the current year. We're projected to spend $201. So we're about $50,000 higher than we spent 2 years ago and $50,000 higher than our budget estimate. So that's a line item that we're going. We're budgeting $175 for next year, hoping that it comes down some. So, water, 2021, we spent $1.899 million in the general fund. We budgeted $1,720 this year for water. We're projected to spend $1.9 million this year in water. The reason for that is it's been a dry year. So if we have a wet year, that number's less. If we have a dry year, that number's higher. So we built a budget of 1.7, we're projected to spend 1.9. We built a budget next year of 1.84 million. So again, there's allowances in the budget to kind of absorb those overages and others we save in other. In total, we're saving about 700,000 in that particular line item. We're overspending that line item because it was a dry year.
I appreciate our staff that has to guess at conflict in Ukraine, inflation, pandemics, and how much it's going to rain to create a budget. So I don't know if you use Old Farmer's Almanac to do that or historic charts, but we're really impressed.
So I would note that's not our total water usage, that's just what we pay for out of the general fund. We've also got the golf course. Do we pay any water out of the assessments? No, yeah. So yeah, if you look at the budget, you can see going back 3 years, kind of the history of the trends of where things are going. General liability insurance, I mentioned those categories that are going up in the base budget. So insurance, liability, 572 in 2021. We budgeted 598 last year. The actual cost was 600. Next year we're budgeting 717. So we get the estimate from our insurer. So this year 600. Next year we're assuming an insurance bill of 717,000. So that's 120,000 more for general liability insurance. Yeah.
Dan, is that any policy considerations, or is it slip and fall, random golf balls, the insurance going up? Is it workplace safety?
So we're a part of an insurance pool. So because of the insurance industry, but also because of the disasters in California. So they pool the insurance of 108 park districts in the state, and we all share in that. But I would say generally, a large part of the pool itself, the entire pool is also going up. And insurance is going up for everybody, but there is an element of local experience in the calculation. So if you have higher claims and higher premiums, there's an element of the premium that gets jacked up because of that. Ours is going up, obviously. We've had a lot of insurance claims lately, the fire being one, Tirana landfill. So a lot of that, some of it is just general increases, but some of it is local experience. They gave us a range of increase from 10 to 20%, so about 10% of it is pool increases, and they said we'd be closer to 20% as our individual district because of our recent experience and large number of claims we've had to file.
Really, what part of my asking was, it was not policy decisions like cutting back on maintenance is causing it, it's fire, things that we can't control.
We have a very robust safety program, and we've gotten safety award before. But Capri, our insurer, comes down, and Teresa and the staff spend a lot of time on risk reduction, risk management. So we have a whole program that we do to reduce that. But to your point, yes, if our playgrounds get older, if we don't keep up on our sidewalks, if we don't keep up on our tree trimming, and if we don't have the money to do those things, our risk goes up and will likely lead to more claims. So there are decisions that you guys make financially and otherwise that allow us to keep that stuff current and new. And if we don't make those decisions, it could increase the local liability for us in that local experience calculation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So how did the fire up in Paradise basically destroy their park district? I mean, we were caught up to that, as well as the Woolsey fire, right?
Yeah, well, the pool had this, so all 108 of us had to pay for the costs of the fires wherever they were. So the Paradise fire and the fire in our district drove up the claims, which then the other districts that didn't have fires that's part of the rationale for the pool. So yes, and if there's another year when there's a fire in another part of the state, but it's not here, we will be sharing in through the pooling, sharing in helping them pay theoretically for their claims and losses. Any other questions on the expense recommendations or base budget? Okay. This is just a depiction. So within the general fund, we keep track of the Simi Valley area of the district and the Oak Park area of the district. So this chart shows you the Simi Valley revenues and the Simi Valley expenditures. We know exactly how much revenue is coming out of Simi Valley and how much coming out of Oak Park. You can see that Simi Valley is a positive 133. So we have 133,000 more in revenue proposed than we do have in budgeted expenditures. I would note that when after school club closure in Oak Park, this number was a lot larger. So the revenue in Simi was being used to support the Oak Park area. Over the last few years, we've strategically tried to balance that out and get it back into line. So this is the Simi Valley area right now. So Simi's got $133,000 surplus. If you go to the Oak Park budget, because we have a balanced budget, the Oak Park budget is $133,000 in balance. So this is their revenue, that's their expenditures. So we're in the larger general fund, we're using Simi resources to balance the budget in Oak Park, to balance the total budget. Like I said, in previous years, this was a lot larger. We've strategically got that more into balance, but that's where we sit now. Optimally, this would be in perfect balance. So you'd have, each of the communities' tax revenue would go back into that community, and same with Oak Park. That being said, we're one district. The other thing I always note here is that we allocate cost to Oak Park in this analysis for administrative overhead, basically, and our cost allocation to Oak Park is not what I would call a full cost allocation. So their share of the central services is not probably the full cost of what those central services, what they get for service versus what's budgeted here is different. So if we were to do a full cost allocation, this would be a larger imbalance. But we are one district, and we recognize that, and Oak Park benefits from being part of a larger district from an overhead perspective.
Dan, the Oak Park Advisory Committee has some new members. If they were asked, do you think most of them are aware of those two different things you said, the allocation and the second one is the subsidy?
I think most of them, maybe 3 or 4 of them are aware because I've done this presentation with them, but I do plan to give this presentation. I will be reviewing the budget with them at their next committee meeting and also at the Oak Park public hearing. So I will be going through these charts with them at those meetings.
I know we went through a long process over several years to try to explain it. And I think now the current committee has a much better handle on their budget and revenues and expenses.
Right.
They're very fortunate over there with their water, actually.
Yes, we've got a good water source over there, recycled water at a cheaper,
Yes.
little bit cheaper rate. I don't know if that's true anymore, but because the recycled water rates have gone up quite a bit as well. So.
But I mean, they haven't.
Any question on the breakout here of the Simi Valley Oak Park areas of the general fund
The
budget?
question I have though is, so they're running a negative. Do we have some way of balancing that, or will we throw that question to the committee?
We would have to cut expenditures to balance their budget.
Exactly.
So they would lose service to the tune of $133,000. So. Yes, but we're at a service level. We've got the maintenance contingent out there, and we've got the rec staff. So we do have some extra on the Simi side that we can help keep the staffing levels and level of service out there. So I'd probably be looking at cutting a maintenance position or cutting a position at the community center to make up for that imbalance, which I didn't want to recommend this year. We can still work as they get new tax revenue. We can try to close that gap as we get more revenue, which is what I've been trying to do. So I think we can fix this in the next couple of years through additional revenue without having to cut positions and service levels. So yes, that would be the answer though. If you wanted to perfectly balance this, we'd probably have to cut a position or two, in probably one position in Oak Park. Because I can't think of anything in their supplies budget that has room to be cut while still meeting supplies and gasoline and water and that stuff. So. This is our assessment fund, and we're going to spend quite a bit of time on this, but just going across this is the Simi. So we have one assessment. We budget for it in a separate fund called Fund 30. But similar to general fund, we also break it out into Simi Valley assessment and Oak Park assessment, but functionally it's one assessment. That being said, you can see the revenue here. I'm just going to go to the total revenue line item. 106, or it was 168, 181, 1823 estimated actual. The first column, this is where there's no assumptions in this budget. So we have 3 alternatives outlined for you, and we're going to get into this a little bit. So this number is your estimated revenue with no CPI adjustment to the assessment this year. The second column is your recommended revenue, or the revenue budget, if we were to consider the existing assessment with a 3% CPI. And the third column represents the existing budget if we were to do the 3% CPI, and then up to the maximum amount. If the board will recall, we did not do the CPI, I think 2 or 3 years ago, 3 years ago. So in the maximum assessment calculation, we reserve the right to make up for the year that we skipped, so to speak. So this is the revenue estimates for that. Your expenditure estimates are here. Most of this is in positions. So as the cost of an employee increases, you're going to see your position budget increase. And then we've got supplies here. The big takeaway here is in utilities and electric. You can see that we're budgeted at $290, we're projected to spend $412, and I budgeted $350 for next year. But even with all of that, you can see there's an imbalance in the assessment fund. So if we don't do a CPI, the imbalance is we're negative $152,000. If we do a 3% CPI, we're negative $99,000. And if we do the complete catch-up, we're negative $45,000. Hold that thought, because I'm going to come back to that. So those are kind of the revenue and expenditure impacts of that. The expenditures are all constant, just the different assessment, just different alternatives on the revenues. This is your Oak Park.
So even with 3%, we come out with a negative.
Correct. Yes. And I'm going to frame that here in the next slide, so I'll go through, explain all of that. Yeah. But you're correct. So in each column, it has the amount of the imbalance. This is the Oak Park assessment, same scenario. We're expecting $175,000. If we don't do a CPI this year, $175, 3%, $180, $185. Down to your imbalance, no CPI, $53,000. 3% CPI, $44,000. 3% plus catch-up, $42,000. So let me bring it together right in the next slide. So depending on the alternative that's selected, so if you have a 0% CPI between the two areas in the assessment district, you've got a $205,000 budget imbalance, meaning that the revenue in the assessment funds is not supporting the cost in the assessment funds, and that's just the same reasons we've been saying, is the revenue growth in property tax is not keeping pace with the cost of the expense growth. And the primary driver there is the electrical costs. So if the revenue goes up 3% and our electrical costs are going up 10, 12, 15%, it doesn't keep pace within the fund. If you do a 3% CPI, we're $147,000 imbalanced. And if we do the full CPI, we're $97,000 out of balance. Our choices are, when the assessment fund is not in balance, we have to move the expense over to the general fund. So if we don't have enough revenue in the assessment, we have to move what we've historically been paying for out of the assessment fund. We have to absorb that cost in the general fund. So your general fund budget right now it has a line item in it, and we're going to move $180,000 of cost, depending on the scenario and the selection. We'd move $180,000 of cost over for the general fund, because it would have to pay that cost, which means that's $180,000 expense that the general fund didn't have. Now it's going to have, because the assessment fund can't support it. This is a list, kind of a menu of options, depending on this. At a minimum, even if you did this, I've got to find $97,000 out of these items over here on the right to balance the budget, depending on the assumption. So if it's 0%, we've got to find $205,000. If it's that number, it's $97,000. I did want to note on number 1, I've got $180,000 reserved in the general fund, really for kind of 2 purposes. One is if we need to use all of that to pay for whatever decisions we make over here, then we would use all of the $180,000 to assume the expenses from the assessment fund. If we don't use all of that for that, I've got to reserve funds for staffing when we open the activity center. So to the extent that I need to use all of the $180,000 to absorb the electrical costs, that means I won't have any money to add staff for the activity center probably in a year and a half. If we make decisions and that's a lesser number, then I'll have some seed money to plan for new staff for the activity center. So that's listed under both because it depends on what we do. These are other areas in the budget that I would recommend reducing depending on the decisions that are made. These are some other areas that I'd recommend we reduce our current base budget in order to absorb the cost of the imbalances in the left-hand column. So.
To reduce the marketing, you actually reduce the revenue. So that
There could be a revenue impact. Yeah, we're trying to get the marketing going. I think there's a payoff to that. That's true with rec staffing as well. If you reduce rec staffing, there's revenue components to that. So it's not a 1-for-1. Without the programs, we don't get the revenue. So.
Because if you're programming, your staffing should be
Right.
almost covered by the program.
Line item number 3, the ASC right now, we're in that mode where we're trying to open. If the board recalls, the staff, I'll try to be as accurate as I can. We dealt with left staffing, including the assistant directors. So we ran the clubs with just directors. We didn't have assistant directors, and I don't know if all of them, but in some of them. We've tried to add those assistant directors back into the staffing model. That'll increase the level of service at the clubs. So for this year, we could roll back again because the enrollment's still down. It's not something we want to do, but we could. But eventually, we're going to need to add that 90,000 back in if our enrollment goes back up to 680, 700, and we're going to need the assistant directors again. So for 1 year, we could maybe ask the staff to reduce the staffing levels in the after-school clubs, but eventually we're going to have to add that back anyways. So that's an option as well. 5 and 6. COLAs and what we provide for our great employees. Those all cost money, so you could have the option to reduce the amount of the COLA that's provided to the balance of the employees to make this work. And then the 6th item is usually, that's when you get into, if you get into tight financial times, usually to keep vacancies through attrition, retirements, or folks that leave. We wouldn't refill that position to generate budget savings. So that's just a menu of stuff on the right that we could pick from in order to fix the problem on the left. And those are my kind of recommendations of a menu that we would potentially consider. There's other items, but a lot of the other stuff, supplies, gasoline, water, all those are a lot of fixed costs. Safety issues, we don't want to pinch the supplies budget too much because we've got to fix things and pay for things. But if I were to balance the budget and had to address the imbalance on the left, those are the things that I would be recommending to you that we consider to reduce or modify in the base budget that's presented to you.
Dan, I know that we're one district and we have an assessment district, but if we really wanted to have 2 different rates.
I think we asked that question last year, and I don't think we can because it was formed as one district. They have to have the same rate. We can't have 2 different rates. Now, if we wanted to do that, you'd have to go through a process. But we're one. We can't have 2 different rates for the 2 communities.
By that, I mean that process would be to basically pass the assessment again and have new wording that says, and there could be different rates.
There could be a new assessment, say, for Park.
Like for example, we also have an assessment in Oak Park, Fund 70. It's a separate assessment district. So you could either do a new assessment district that's unique to an area and add, or I don't know the legality of modifying the existing. I don't know that process.
Before it comes back to us, I'd like to just know, I understand it not be easy to do, but if Oak Park said we didn't want to cut services, we want a higher assessment, but we didn't see that as a need in St. Valley, if there's, maybe you'll propose, and go over it, and you'll say, this is what you could do, and it'll be too difficult, like creating different assessment districts. But I'd just be interested what the answer is. I'm
Yeah,
sure we
we
could
could.
do it, but it might be too much to do.
The question would be, can we modify the existing assessment district to accommodate that, or would we have to create a new assessment district to provide that revenue?
Dan, Susan's on the line, she may be able to answer that.
Okay, yeah.
So can they modify Fund 40? Because they have the two assessments over there.
Yeah, I'd have to bring that back. I can bring that back for the board. Rather than get into that, I'd rather take some time to talk to Susan.
Rather than forward
Yeah.
the overall district assessment.
So if you give me some time between now and when we bring the budget back, I could have some firmer answers for you on that.
When did they approve the Fund 40? You know?
Fund 70, Fund 40 is the developer fees. Fund 70 is the other. I think that goes back to the early 80s.
Special zone.
Yeah.
I think I've seen like 1980-ish. It's been around.
I'm seeing Mark Johnson nod yes in the back.
1980, Mark? 81?
Yeah, around that time,
Yeah. So Fund 70 as an assessment's been in existence longer than Fund 30.
I know Brooke decided on the second one.
I think we decided on the Fund 30. I don't know what their involvement was. I don't know the history of Fund 70 and how that materialized. So I'm guessing somebody over there thought they wanted same thing. They said probably, I think it was around the Ranger program, so they wanted some extra services out there, different from CME, same scenario, I bet. And so they came up and said, hey, we'll pass an assessment to, I think it was around Ranger services or something of the sort, where they said as a community, so we're going to fund 70 to get more revenue for these things. So now that I think about it a little more, I think it was formed for the exact purpose that you're contemplating now, Brett.
When we get back to it, I don't have a particular tool I'm looking to use, but just if that's what the community asks for.
Yeah. That may be an option too, is increasing the assessment in Fund 70. I don't know what the rules were and caps and what they could do, but that might be, rather than creating a new one, can they modify or enhance the Fund 70 assessment? So I'll take that as direction to bring back some little more information on how that would be accomplished.
I don't know how they feel about it.
Yeah. Okay.
I just figure if they ask about it, I would like to be able to say, well, we could do it, but. And then
I would note,
pro and con.
and I think they are interested in higher levels of service for open space and wildlife management. We offer a certain level of service within our expenditures, but that would be one, if you guys want more service in open space and wildlife management and that kind of stuff, you need more revenue. So that would be an item where I'd say, hey, this is what we provide. If you guys want a higher level of service, we're going to have to figure out a way to generate some more revenue to provide that higher level of service. So it's a good example, though. Any other questions on that? We're going to come back to this slide when we get to the policy considerations. We can try to go through the rest of this relatively quickly. That's kind of the heavy lift other than capital. Trying to make this work. So Alex, there's a green light on here that keeps flashing and it tells me if the power's on or not. But it's very half working. I'm guessing the batteries may be going dead in this thing. That's my guess. Alex, can you operate the PowerPoint?
Yeah, I can.
But I'm not going to have my pointer either.
Dan, what computer's running the PowerPoint?
It's fine. It's just controlling it from that.
So it should be pointing it over.
Yes.
But the green light is, now it's on. See how it's kind of.
I
Yeah.
can control it there if you want.
It's green. Going on and on.
It seems to be working. This is your park dedication fee. So this is when a developer comes in, we get a fee associated with the development. We then use that fee to expand parks or improve parks. So this is a one-time revenue source from new development in town. You can see that development, we're getting quite a bit of revenue out of this right now. You can see that, and there's development going on in town. So across the year, 753,000, 719 this year, we're projecting a proposed 702. We typically transfer this or use it to support projects on the capital list. So this would be a funding source. This is your Fund 50. This is the total expenditures. I'm going to go through this in detail, but that's your summary page for the capital fund. I'll go through the 10.5 million. This is the Oak Park Special Revenue Fund. You can see they get about 233,000 a year in property tax revenue. And down on the bottom, you can see how we're using that building contract services, gasoline, improvements, and janitorial services. Can somebody, have you got any batteries by chance?
Yeah.
I think that's the problem.
I also have another one.
The reason I need it is because the pointer.
I'm impressed you have the batteries ready to go.
Oh yeah, we got it all.
He's aiming for another employee.
The person I nominated mentioned that he had batteries ready.
Right, this is your enterprise golf fund. It's called an enterprise fund under government accounting because we operate it like a business. So it's got some different accounting rules relative to golf operations. This is a summary of both golf courses. So you can see up across the top, you've got the Simi Hills revenue going back to 2021, what we're projecting for 2022-23. The Sinaloa revenue, and then you can see you've got the recommended expenditures. We're not recommending any new spending very much in golf, and new positions, or everything's pretty much flat there. We are recommending some capital enhancements in golf, but from an operating perspective, it's pretty much, I like to call it apples to apples as compared to this year's budget. But Ryan and the staff are doing a very good job managing the golf course.
At Simi Hills, I apologize.
Go ahead. So 3 million is set aside for the
Yeah,
irrigation
so
system.
golf has a separate fund balance, and depending on how much that is, that's the source of revenue for any future capital projects that we need in golf. Brian calls it CapEx, I think is the golf term for it. But that fund balance is then what we use to fund golf expenditures. So I'm going to go through this in detail, but you can see for this year I'm recommending a large appropriation for golf course maintenance, and then I'm going to go through the 5-year golf capital plan that we put together.
I'm sorry, I jumped ahead to the next one.
That's right.
Capital improvement.
Got it, yeah.
I did also.
So golf, this is, we worked with Brian's staff and Wayne's staff in terms, we're going to have capacity to actually do these projects. But this is your 5-year plan for golf. So the total cost of the 5-year plan I'm not seeing on here. Miguel, if you could total that. Do we have a total? Can you give me the total of the 5 years for golf? Total of the 5-year estimate? Right here in the budget document, probably.
Are we looking at taking out some of that grass in the entry to the golf course?
Hold that thought for 1 second here. That's okay, Miguel, we don't need to do that. That's okay. So the point is that over the next 5 years, this plan for, I'm not sure where that arrow came, I'm not sure where the red dot came from. Okay, so the total of the capital expenditures would be what we're saying we need to spend and invest in the course over the next 5 years. So let's say that's, I don't know, $7 million, $6.5 million. The funding source for that is the fund balance in the golf fund. So the revenue that's generated in golf, we generate extra revenue, which then goes to support the capital plan. Also, it's important to note that we need to keep fund balance in golf, just like we do in the general fund for operating emergencies and other things. So a lot of the revenue that's being generated in golf through fees and that is going to be reinvested back in the golf course. But if we want to follow this plan, the revenue from the golf course has to be enough, $7 million or whatever this list is, to fund these projects. So right now we have about $5 million in golf. We've got to save about $1 million of it for an operating emergency fund in case it closes or something happens. So right now we've got about $4 million in available revenue, cash, that we can apply to our capital list. So in year one, we are recommending, of the $4 or so million that we have in cash available, these are the projects that we're recommending you appropriate as a part of the 5-year plan to reinvest back in the golf course. You can see the biggest one there is the irrigation replacement, both the design and the system. We've been talking about that for years. Brian has all the answers on that. I'll try to summarize that. But basically, our irrigation system is old, extremely inefficient, and also losing water. Through this capital investment, we'll have a more efficient system where we can turn on individual heads and more efficiently use water. Plus, we will have less leaks, because there's leaks in there. Plus, we will have less repair jobs to do when the existing one breaks. So this is a project that we've been on the planning. We know we need to do it. It's one of those things like, but the time has come where we want to take the dive, appropriate funds, and get this project done. In addition to that, bridge replacement, we've talked about the kitchen remodel. That's in year one. There's some fencing repair, new fencing that's needed out there. Sinaloa, chipping green renovation, paint the clubhouse, and redo the parking lot at Sinaloa. So that's what we're recommending in that 5-year plan.
100,000 doesn't sound like enough for the kitchen, is it?
Probably not, but we'll see when we get there.
That's just for the planning and design.
Oh, planning and design, got it.
Yeah, the project will be considerably more than that.
Yes, you're right, sorry. So I'm going to jump back to the 5-year plan real quick, because this is new in our 5-year plan. So these are the year one projects, and that's a good point. This is for the design. The actual redo of the building is right there. So $930 for the actual kitchen remodel in year two, but we're going to do the design in year one, I call it. So we're recommending we appropriate money for design, but we won't construct it until 23-24.
And the same on the irrigation system, the 150 is for the contract?
For design, yeah. So part of what we're doing here is we've got a lot of projects going on. You guys know all the projects we got going on the non-golf area of the budget. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to hire some outside folks to project manage and that kind of stuff, because we've got everybody too busy. So the idea with golf is either a combination of in-house staff, but also we'll be hiring some additional staff to help manage these projects because we have too much capacity. So we've gone through and talked about so that the cost of like a project manager or a designer in some of these is built into the project cost. We just don't have the capacity. If we've got this much going on, we've got to bring more people on board to actually get the projects done. So we've talked about that. It's a challenge all the time, even if we have the money, is having the capacity to bid documents, go out to bid, inspect, award contracts, manage the contract. So
I noticed on Sinaloa, the split rail fence, there's some repairs need to be made along there, but I think that might be part of the city's assessment landscape.
the Sinaloa one, I don't know. We'll have to ask.
There are. We actually had, those are both cars that had gone off the road and went through it. And we have a contractor that's working on giving us a price. He's unfortunately booked about 6 months in advance, and it's hard to squeeze in time to get jobs done.
Okay.
But we're working on those.
So when we approve the capital improvement plan, it's different than appropriation. This is the new plan for Simi Hills and Sinaloa to reinvest back, and we need to generate revenue in the Gulf Fund to support these investments. Any questions on that?
Speaking of the kitchen remodel, just to make sure, because there are tenants there right now, have we communicated with the tenants that this will be happening and they're all good, they're happy? Okay.
They want the remodel.
Okay.
Yeah.
I assume they may have been an influence on...
Yeah, they're kind of driving the initiative.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Just try to make sure the Zoom folks can hear the staff comments.
There's some things that are routine maintenance or maintenance that needs to be done, but my favorite thing on here is bending the cost. And the way I'm defining that is, if you need to replace the fence, you gotta replace the fence. But if you add solar, and I see that for the parking lot, that bends the cost because you put up money, but eventually it saves money. And I see the same thing, and I was excited to hear about that with the water project, fixing leaks. That's bending the cost, and that's my favorite thing when I see these budgets, is when you find ways to do that.
Right, yeah, new heads will be about 10 to 15% more efficient than the existing ones. And on our annual water of 800,000-ish, that'll save us a good chunk of money. And, another thing that's not on there is there's a program that just got announced by the city for turf reduction. And as we are planning to take some turf out anyway with this project, we should be able to apply for that rebate, which is about another 150,000 that we should be eligible for. So we're hoping that those things sync up and we're able to capture a little bit of savings there.
In government, I see often the conversation is increasing fees or taxes or cutting services, but then I see bending the cost, and that's why I was complimenting you on fitting that into. I think Elaine had a question about the turf removal.
Right, I think the staff is looking at turf removal. I was thinking particularly in the entrance to the Simi Hills. It's very nice, but that's not useful turf.
I'll take the question generally, and then I'll have Brian. So district-wide, we've been thinking about non-golf, we've been thinking about doing an analysis of turf removal. My understanding is that when in the last drought, we did a lot of turf removal already at Simi Hills. So a lot of that, a good chunk of it has been done at Simi Hills, like we're planning to do in the other. There are probably still some other areas potentially, Brian, that we could do. So generally, the point is that golf went through that exercise 4 or 5 years ago.
Right, yeah, over the last 8 or 10 years, our entire master plan, called for around 18 acres of turf to be, converted over to landscape beds or low growth, whatever. We've accomplished maybe 5 acres of that in different chunks. So we still have a considerable number of acres that are planned to be removed as we build our new irrigation system. We're going to design the system to the edges of this anticipated turf removal so that we'll have part circle heads on those lines. So it'll make it easier to, carve those out and make them look attractive when we do it.
Part of our analysis for reducing water usage is taking out turf, and I understand that. I'd ask that we also consider when planning and maintenance. There's been an added increase in interest in eliminating the use of Roundup, and I'm not discussing that part tonight, whether we should or should not. But the reason I mention it is if we plan these projects and we remove the turf, but then we need to use more Roundup, and then later the community doesn't want us to use it. It was planned from the beginning where it's not necessary in the design project. And I understand, like, you put in turf and you have to ride a lawnmower around a tree, or there's cracks in the cement. But just as designing that part, so if the community comes to the board and says, please limit the use, we don't put our maintenance department in a tough spot because we just designed it with a place that can't be done other ways.
Right, yeah, and maintenance guys could address it, as far as what the alternatives are and how effective they are. I know there are alternatives to Roundup. They are somewhat less effective, and to some degree, maybe very much less effective. But yeah, that would be a better question for those guys.
I didn't mean to address it tonight. I just meant not to assign them impossible or more work when we remove turf. We designed something that there's no way to maintain it except.
Yeah, it's a good
Something that
consideration, yeah.
Yeah.
We replace turf and then we end up with more weeds and more Roundup use. So something in the design, and we're looking at that. It's a good
I mean,
thought.
there are lantana, there's a lot of things that look really nice, grow really large, and
Yeah.
Right, yeah, ice plant. There's a lot of different, vegetation that we can put in some of those areas, and that's one of the benefits of designing the part circles into it. So if the out of play areas, the turf is removed and it's not being watered, there's going to be less growth of weeds. And it will in the wintertime when it rains, if it rains. But yeah, that will keep that down to a minimum.
Good.
That's all my questions.
Chair, I've got a couple more slides here, and it might be a good time to take a little break before we move along, but
Sounds
a couple
ideal.
more to get through, and then we'll...
Before we take a break, I know that we're mostly sticking to questions. It's more of a conversation style, but maybe we should ask, especially on Zoom, if there's any public comment before we get into the policy discussion part.
Sure, yeah, usually we get presentation, then public comment.
Yeah.
We can
I'm
do
just
that.
saying, let's not skip that part.
Yeah, we'll take public comment. I would be curious also, Brian, when we discuss potentially removing turf around your golf courses, I would be interested in your opinion and other staff on what would, I don't want to necessarily make your golf courses look ugly. So I would be curious on your input on making sure it still maintains attractiveness and people still want to go golfing, and we're not creating an eyesore while still being responsible members of the community with water use.
This is our grant fund. This is money that comes from grant sources. It's exciting to note we have a lot of grant activity going on, so that we've done well getting grants. We've got Knowles Prop 68 capital grant. We've got the grant for the Arroyo Singing Phase 4. We've got a couple of fire resiliency grants, so this reflects both the revenue and the expenditures in the grant funds. The board's aware of all of those projects. This is your non-golf capital improvement appropriation list. So this is your 22-23 recommended budget for capital projects. This is not the whole 5-year plan. We took a hard, close look at that last year. It is in your packet. But, this is the list of projects that we're recommending for appropriation in the capital plan. Anything of note there? It's exciting to note this is the first year that we've had funding for Phase 4 of the Rancho Simi project. We had about, I think a couple years ago, we had about $3 million reserved. Last year we had enough money to reserve $4.5 million. This year, that is the full cost of the project, and we have that project fully funded now in our budget as recommended. So, board is, this is the one I want to talk about. So deferred maintenance. So Wayne and his staff have a park inspection program, and they keep a list of things that need to be fixed in the parks down to the level of every individual park. So this 1.4 million is very exciting because in the past I've mentioned that we've been trying to find funds to catch up on deferred maintenance items. This budget recommends appropriating 1.4 million for all that stuff. So it's not all the stuff on the inspection, it's kind of the middle column. But the idea of this is we're going to set it aside in the capital fund, and then the guys, as they attack those projects, will kind of draw down on this 1.4 million, and we'll be keeping track of which of the items on the park inspection list that we get completed with the $1.4 million. The park inspection list also has some larger capital projects such as playground replacements, some of the bigger stuff, the more costly stuff. All of those projects from the park inspection list are built into your 5-year capital plan. So we'll be looking to fund those things through the capital process, not necessarily this line item. So another very nice thing is we've got money fully budgeted for deferred maintenance on that park inspection list, and this is the first year we've been able to do that. So.
I have a question on the Terrahana landfill.
Yes.
Another 180,000.
Yeah, good question.
But what are the big boxes up there that I see are like right above the landfill? There's these huge structures. Do you have any idea what that's all about?
I don't. Alex, 1 second, wait, Alex, yeah. PowerPoint. So the landfill, if the board will recall, during the, after the Easy Fire, which was the fire that burned out, there was rain immediately after that for 2 or 3 months, and the whole thing washed out. So it was about a $2 million project, and we are in a partnership with three other agencies: the City of Simi, the County of Ventura, and Ventura Regional Sand. So we played for about a quarter of that project. In December of this year, remember all the rain we got in December? eroded again. So the 180,000 is to go touch up, I would say, and put in some more hydro seed on top of the project that was done about a year and a half ago. So it's an add-on to the previous project because of the December rains. So.
Do you think there will ever be an opportunity for us to utilize the property?
So right now there's we've talked about that a lot. I've been pressing them to. We're under an order from the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and the reason why they're involved is because the arroyo is right at the foot of it. So we're under a 30-year order to close the landfill or do all the things to get it to an area where we can use it for something else. I believe we're in year 30. But the Regional Water Control Board has not released us from our order yet. We might be in year 28 or 30. So I've been pressing them to do what we need to do and then once that happens, then we can think about ways that we could use it for something potentially. But we can't do that until the order is completed, so to speak, and all the work in the landfill closure process. Got my slideshow there, Alex?
Yeah.
Little box on the right, can you? Any other questions on this list? I think the board is familiar with most of these items. I pointed out the two that are relatively new. These are the budgeted capital projects in the Oak Park area of the district. The big one there is the lagoon. Exciting thing there is the board let the contract, and we got commitment from the insurance company to pay for generally all of the lagoon and hopefully all of it by the time we complete it. But this is your list of Oak Park capital projects that's planned in the budget.
I like the way you included the deferred maintenance as a capital project, because then it won't get overlooked.
Thank you. Now might be a good time. I don't know, usually we do the whole staff presentation, then we do public comment. I don't know if you want to do it twice. We can hold the break. We can get through all of this, take public comment, and then break.
I have no preference.
I have no preference. Just keep rolling.
Let's keep rolling.
Okay, we can roll, and then when we get to deliver, we can take public comment, and then maybe a break, and then get into or whatever you guys want.
Yeah, let's do that.
Some other things that are we want to update the board on. So PERS, we know PERS is a public employment retirement system. We're all aware of the challenges of the public employee retirement system. Our board has been responsive. We went to a second tier way back in 2010. There's now another tier for PEPRA. Our last news was that our unfunded actuarial liability was at about $12 million. That has been reduced to $6 million. Six. So, which is really good and nice job by the board. So what that means is if we were to close today, the money that we have in the PERS fund is we're $6 million short. However, we have $6 million that we could do that. So I can say that we are, I think we're at 88% or some, I don't remember we're like 80, we're in the 80s, which is a really good, so they say, what percentage of your obligations is funded? We're in the high 80s, and we're on the upper end of, if you compared us to other public agencies, our percent funded status is way better, I would guess, than 80% or 90% of public agencies in the state. We also have $6 million that, if that were to happen, it's not going to happen. That being said, I have not seen the 30-year actuarial. That's what we're supposed to get that in the August-September timeframe. So what that means is if our UAL goes down, our annual contributions to PERS get lower. In terms of how that impacts our operating budget and how much money we put into PERS, the assumption is that we should start to see our contributions to PERS going down. However, they haven't done their actuarial based on the new numbers yet. The other caveat there is that that number went down because the market did really well last year. I think they got a 22% return. Since that time, we've known what the market has done. So while we had a good year last year and we recognized a UAL reduction from 12 million to 6, I wouldn't be surprised if that 6 jumped back up based on current market conditions. So anyhow, we're hopeful that, but that is very, very good news that our UAL went down from 12 million to 6, and we're at an 80-some% funded status. Very good news. We're hopeful that'll result in lower contributions, which means less from the general fund, which means those monies can be used to fix our 5-year imbalance.
Are they still looking for a 7% return?
6.75, they lowered it. I think they might be down to 6.75. So actuarially, they assume 6.75. If they do more than that, our contributions and our UAL will get better. If they don't get 6.75, then our cost goes up annually. So. OPEB, we're waiting. We're going to bringing that actuarial to you guys in December. Oh, this summer, yeah. So in August, we're working on the OPEB actuarial. I'll have more information from you on that. But basically, there's nothing to fear there, so to speak. It's what we expected and what we've shared with the board in the past. And your budget at this point is supporting those requirements. OPEB is other post-employment benefits, so it's basically retiree health care. So the district had obligations previously. You guys have since rolled those retiree health program back. So we've got retired employees that are drawing on that, but we don't have the same, we have a much lower level of benefit for new employees, so our current employees. Anyhow, nothing surprising there. Fire recovery insurance, just to update the board, we're working with FEMA, we're working with insurance, had the Edison settlement. We are close to the lagoon is the last project we have to do, so we won't be able to close the insurance claim until the final costs for the lagoon are done. Once that's complete, I think Wayne said October, November, Wayne, December. Once the lagoon's complete, we'll be able to close the insurance claim out. In terms of the Edison settlement we received, that is still being reserved in this budget depending on the outcome of the closure of the insurance claim. So I anticipate next year, middle of next year, maybe in next budget year, we'll be talking about those capital funds. So I did include the 5-year capital funding plan. It's in your document. I didn't go through it in detail this year. I did go through year 1. It's basically been updated to reflect what's on the park maintenance list, plus all those other items that the board had directed us to include in the past. Vehicles, just wanted to touch there. We had about 2 years of funding appropriated for various vehicles. We haven't been able to get the vehicles. So this budget basically carries over the funding from the previous 2 years for those vehicles we had previously approved. We didn't want to add any more funding for vehicles because we can't get the vehicles we want now, so we thought we'd not appropriate. That being said, there are 2 vehicles that have been red flagged by the Air Pollution Control District. There is funding reserved or proposed in your budget to replace, and they're 2 critical vehicles, so we put those in the budget to replace those to make sure that we're compliant with air pollution control. The board's aware of, we've got some property maintenance issues. Terre Haute we talked about. There's a creek in Lindero that needs some improvements that we don't have any money in here for that yet, but that may end up being a capital project we have to do. And then I've told the board about that slope issue at Sycamore Canyon Park. There's no money in here for those yet because we're evaluating those at different levels. So somewhere maybe in your final, your preliminary budget or one of your hearings or your final budget, we may have to budget some funds to address those issues. I did want to let the board know that we need to have in mind that we are going to have to hire staffing for the activity center, so I need to be building capacity in the general fund in anticipation of bringing on probably 3 or 4 new positions to operate the activity center. I don't have capacity built in the budget for that right now, so we've got to figure out a way to get those costs funded. And then finally, just not a recommendation in the budget now, just an item of note. I think I mentioned it to the board in the past. There may be good reason to take some of our part-timer positions and not operate with so many part-time positions and convert the part-timers to another 3rd full-time ranger. So I understand we had 3 full-time rangers a number of years ago now. So I don't know that there will be a cost to that, but we kind of reduce the part-time budget and not use so many part-time rangers and use a 3rd full-time ranger in lieu of part-timers. So again, not a recommendation at this point, but something that may be bringing to you at some point in the budget process or maybe during next year to contemplate giving us the authority to do that. And I think so now we're to policy consideration, so now would be a good time to take public comment before we get into deliberation and direction.
Are there any public statements on staff presentation, either via Zoom or in person? I am seeing none in person. Alex, do you see anyone on Zoom?
Douglas Bamford.
Mr. Bamforth, do you have a public statement you'd like to make?
Could you exit the presentation so we can see them?
Yes, I have a comment. I'd like to thank Mr. Kernick for explaining this budget in a way that even I can understand. Great job.
Thank you, Doug.
Very kind words. Thank you, Mr. Bamforth. Any other public statement? I am seeing none, and I'm not seeing anyone else on Zoom. Is that correct, Alex? Okay.
I'd recommend we break for a little bit.
Following staff recommendation, let's take a 5-minute break. We'll be back at 7:20 p.m.
I think I'm gonna, so these are the so the idea is that we'll be bringing you back a preliminary budget on June 15th. So what we bring back to you is pretty much what's here, unless you want to give us direction to bring other things back. So Alex, I'm going to have you do this part. If you could go to the beginning of the presentation to the slide with the green on it. It's near the beginning. Yes, so so let me get my list of policy considerations here. So this is pretty much when we're talking about policy considerations, general fund preliminary balancing recommendations. It's pretty much, are you okay with this, or do you want to see something different? It's the items, the summary of the budget we're recommending for the general fund and any additional items here on this particular operating budget.
Yeah, looking at that. I did ask about it earlier, like for the community center. I know these numbers were put together before. We just going to, should we wait to get into detail?
I'm going to report that out under my district manager report. There may be some mileage implications at this point, and the district manager comments I was going to do that, but generally I anticipate that that'll be generally covered by insurance, so it may be built in here as a project. That work's going to start immediately, but I don't think it's going to change this a whole lot. I did want to mention one thing that I forgot. Teresa and I had the pleasure of getting a letter from the California State Department of Audits, and they're going to audit our COVID money that we received, the $3.2 million. So I think we're all good. However, it's an audit, so I'm hopeful that we're able to hold on to the COVID funds, because the state is going to come down and audit that COVID funding we received. That could, depending on the outcome of that, although I think it will be fine, that could impact the capital recommendations in this budget, depending on how that audit goes.
When would we know that? Any idea?
They're actually coming down here the first week of June. So I would anticipate we'd know that maybe by the end of June. So it'll either impact your preliminary, but probably won't hear back from them before the preliminary, but it may impact for the public hearings and the final budget we adopt, depending on that outcome. So I don't see that impacting this budget before June 15th, but it could. So that's just something to be aware of. And some of that funding is part of the capital plan.
Are they doing like an audit, is that it?
They're going to do an audit of the application we submitted.
I see.
So to make sure the numbers we gave them were all accurate and
We're not
correct.
concerned, are we?
Oh, I'm concerned, yes.
I mean, are we?
I'm not concerned at what we submitted. I'm concerned because the formula they used benefited us immensely, and I don't think they realized that until after the fact.
I see.
So I'm concerned that they will use this to potentially say, oops, we didn't mean this. So I think all the data and everything we submitted, it was all good and is all compliant with the formula, and we got what we got. That being said, I think when they come down to do the audit, they're going to see that the formula they used was very beneficial to us. So, and I think the formula was put in regulation in state law. So I don't, they're going to have a tough time unwinding that in my mind, but hopefully they will honor this process they set up, and they will honor how they set up the process for distributing the funds. If that is the case, we will be fine.
Are they doing this to all agencies?
No, selective. Yeah. So I wasn't surprised that they selected us. But it's a selective. They had the whole list, and they grabbed some agencies off that list to do an audit. So more to come on that, like I said.
So we wouldn't, looking at the next step in the schedule, we may be in kind of a gray area for a while, not knowing exactly whether that number will hold.
Potentially. Yeah. I just don't have the information to, I'll have to talk about that more. Like I said, it may impact, if you adopt the budget, I may be back asking you to amend the budget, so to speak, to reprioritize some things. So I don't want to necessarily assume that until, like I said, I'm 98% confident that everything's fine and we won't need to go through that exercise, but I'm a little worried on that 2% piece. So
We put up the certificate that we just won, the award of transparency, really large in your office.
Yes.
Make sure it's like right behind your head.
So anyhow, anything here outside of that piece of information, this is the operating budget that you'd like to see differently, or any information brought back on the preliminary, any changes? Okay, good there. All right, I'm going to jump down to the assessment district assumptions page. So this one, the way the assessment district works is that you approve a budget before you do the assessment technically. So you demonstrate your needs, and then you go do the assessment based on those needs. So the question here is, how should I build the budget? Not necessarily approving the assessment. So we have needs for all of these things. So just a little bit of direction. Again, we're not making the decision on the assessment itself this evening. We're going to be issuing the engineer's report tonight and putting that out to the public. But I guess the question here is, what assumption do you want me to make in the budget in terms of how I build the budget for this?
Well, I'm hesitant to make a commitment now, but I'm certainly going to support the assessment. The question is, at what level?
Correct.
And I guess I'd like to see.
It's also a decision we could make in the preliminary budget too, after you have the assessment conversation on the first.
Yeah.
So I could bring you this back as the same alternatives, and we could adopt the budget at that time, dependent on how the assessment goes on the first. So that being said,
I know what my position is, but I'd like to see what the actual dollar number is of each of that per parcel increase is.
Yeah, that's on your agenda later tonight, so if it's gonna be, the current assessment's 38 something, and our max is 41.33, and the 3% assumption would be somewhere in between. I do need a little direction on the budget though, because when I bring back the preliminary, I've got to decide on the right-hand column what I'm gonna bring back to you. So I need a little bit of feeling on, because otherwise I won't have a complete budget for you to adopt on June 15th. We could also do that between the 1st and the 15th, correct, Teresa? So if you do want to wait on this, and then on the 1st you'll be selecting, and then it's a little weird though, because you're doing the budget first, and then the assessment supports that budget. So we could also, between the 1st and the 15th, use the decision on the assessment to build the budget between the 1st and the 15th. So that would work, correct? Okay, so yeah, so I guess you're right, you don't need to decide tonight, but I can use the information from the 1st to potentially make final budget decisions.
From a personal perspective, I would not want to reduce building maintenance supply.
Yeah. Okay.
Because that goes back to our ongoing maintenance and keeping things running the way they should be run. So just.
That one, we do have probably some flexibility in there because we increased it this year. Yeah. So if I decreased it, it would be back to prior levels, but we do have the money in the capital fund. So if I reduced here, we still have money in the deferred maintenance column.
As long as that money is there for
but we had increased the building maintenance supplies budget. We increased it in the base budget for that. So if we reduce it, we're going back to current levels. It's not like it's going backwards.
Okay.
And we did add money for deferred maintenance. So there is some flex. That's why it's number 2 on the list. There is some flexibility there to do that and still get done what we need to get done and make progress.
I'm going to use different language for reduce after-school club staffing. I would say what that is reducing quality of after-school clubs.
It is, yes.
So, no, I don't want to reduce the quality of after-school clubs and say, well, they're affordable and accessible, but they're not as attractive as they used to be. So I'm not interested in that part.
If we do an assumption of number 2, then I won't need to do any of those things because it's all at number 1. Right? See the imbalance of 147? So if I need to make up 147, I won't need the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on that list. I'll only need number 1. The impact of number 1 is that's less money I have as seed money to hire the staff for the new activity center or capacity. I'll have to figure out how we do that in a future year. So what I'm saying is number 2, you wouldn't even get to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 if, depending on the assumption you make in the left-hand column. The only way you get into 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is if you select assumption number 1 on the left-hand column or the first alternative.
When you're looking at number 1, what's the start date you would imagine for those positions?
I think we're going to probably budget for them in the next fiscal year, and when they actually start will be sometime during that year. So I'd imagine we might budget for them at this time next year, but there may be only funding in the budget for half a year or 3 months or something like that. But I'm looking at budgeting for them starting next year, and then the year after, I would imagine we'd probably have the full amount, the full cost in the budget.
But if you assume that their staffing is doing programming that may have income associated with it.
Correct. So the net is the difference. So I've taken the net offsetting the revenue. So it would be the net cost of the staffing offset by revenue.
Right.
So it's not going to be the full cost. It'll be some portion of the
It'll be a
cost.
portion of it.
Correct.
And then we could look at that when the time comes.
As long as we have capacity to do it, yes.
Right.
So we can look, yes. But if we do one of the lower assumptions, then I'm going to have to use the reserve for all of the electricity, which means then we're starting from 0, right? So we'd have to dig a little deeper to find the funding for the staffing in a future, looking at that at a future year, yes.
Wayne, I know I've asked you before, but I'm also checking to see if that's changed. The activity center start and finish anticipation. I know those months and years change, but what is the current start and finish about. The reason I'm asking is I'm lining up the start of the staff with the start of, I know you don't want them to start on the day that it's finished.
But we're gonna have to.
You don't want to hire them too soon.
My best guesstimation at this point in time, it's going to take us the rest of the year to get through, or to actually get the plans completed. We got to go to plan check for about 90 days, 3 months. So I'm looking to start construction probably maybe May, June of next year. Take a year to construct. So Dan will have to probably budget about 4 to 5 months in the next, not the following year's budget
20,
for staffing.
22, 23?
Yeah.
23, 24, 23, 24. So next year, all of next year, we don't need a budget.
Right.
The budget bill next year, we'll probably have to have about a half a year staffing to align with the construction schedule.
But at the same time, if we can't staff it, then why are we doing it? And so we have to be able to staff it. I mean, that's what we're here for. That's what we're doing it all for, right?
And if we open it up with not a good plan, it's hard to recapture the energy. You know, as the first visitors come through the door and they decide if they want to start a program here, a class or a club, or come back.
Yeah.
You don't want to say, oh, it'll get better later. You got to impress them the first time.
So in the revenue assumption, we're hopeful that it pays for itself. The revenue is 100% of the cost. That being said, we won't know that until we start doing it. And it'll probably take a while for us to understand exactly what the revenue level will be. I know that the two centers we have now, Oak Park and Community Center, do not 100% cover their costs. So we're going to try to set up a model and a fee schedule and in a way that we can recover all of the costs. But being conservative, we've got to assume there's going to be some level of subsidy there until we actually understand how it's going to do.
I know you wanted to talk about the CPI increase at a different time, but I'm going to say, as a part of that, right below where it says 3% to 3% plus, I want to see it in dollars. Because when we say 3% or 3% plus 3%, that sounds pretty dramatic. But we're saying $39 versus $40. We're talking about $1. It breaks it down a lot easier. And then also add to it per household. It's not per person. It's not per 100,000.
And that's actually in your, there's some of that information in your next report tonight. The other item on tonight's agenda, some of that's in there. So
yeah, I want to see it when we discuss it on if it's the first, like up there. So if anyone says, oh, you're increasing by 6%, and they have a picture of that, they're going to have a picture that says yes to $41 from 39.
Okay.
Instead of just looking at like the park district increased taxes by 6%. No, it's $39 to $41. Yeah. And if someone wants to say 6%, they can look at that too, but they'll be able to see both numbers at the same time.
Okay.
And then I know that we'll discuss in more detail, but the 0% increase is a cut in services, it's in balancing things, it's defunding programs. So I'm not interested in the 0%, but the other numbers I'm more open-minded to see the needs.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would concur. I would support an assessment. I don't know what level yet though.
Okay, that gives me good direction. All right, next policy consideration was capital project recommendations. So Alex, can you go to the list of capital projects? Let's do the general fund first, or the Fund 50. It's near the end of the slide show. The back one. So this is this list and the Oak Park list. Is the board okay with these and the preliminary budget, or do you want to? There's going to be a question here later about board adding items too. So this is just this list. Do you guys want to see any changes to this when I bring back the preliminary budget? And also, if you could go to the Oak Park side too. So it'd be kind of policy direction now, consensus direction that this looks good to bring back.
Not changes to it, but Wayne, you know, I've expressed my opinion on this before. But to save staff time when it comes to a playground redesign, two things I want to share. I'm open-minded to innovative ideas from our staff. If they want to make a playground that stands out from others in some way, it doesn't have to look like every other playground. I'm open to that. And I know that the public could criticize and say, it looks different. Well, yeah, of course. We want to offer a wide variety. And the next part is, I don't want to go too far down the design process. Where I look at the last design, I feel really bad because we've done a lot of work, but I would have preferred something else. So if you just give me a heads up on some of those ideas before they go too far, and then I could give a little bit of input. What I'm looking for, if I was going to summarize it, is a sense of place. Like for example, Mayfair Park doesn't look like every other park, neither does Verde Park. And it gives not a standard, every playground looks the same, but hey, this playground looks different. It's a part of sense of place. It's like the color scheme for our environment, and if we're going to do wild animals instead of giraffes, why not bobcats? Or whatever it is, sometimes there's an element to it. So that doesn't change like the fact that we need to replace the playground, but just that detail.
And it is correct, the Knowles Park is maintaining a fire station aesthetic. And I believe we've discussed that before.
The design of the playground has got a fire station theme.
I would say that also addresses the sense of place, or something unique and all that, so.
Okay, so we're good on that. You could go to the golf capital recommendations. I think on this one I'll ask you both, it's the 5-year plan feel good to you, and then this year's list of projects, both on the, since the 5-year capital plan is new, so to speak.
What is the,
So Alex, if I could get you to go to the golf capital, I think it's earlier in the presentation. So let's start with this year's list. Which one do you guys want to do first? The 5-year plan? The 5-year plan, you're not committing funding to the out years, but you are committing to year 1. So is there any, you guys generally okay with this if I bring this back as part of the preliminary recommendation?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, and then if we could go to the 5-year, I mean, again, the plan we can adjust over the years, so you're generally okay with the concept and the projects that are listed.
Yeah.
Alex, if you can go to the blue 5-year, that's good, and then does this as a concept and kind of look good as a plan?
Brian, the fencing, was that the forward-facing fencing on Alamo?
Right, yes.
And then what were you thinking of replacing it with?
We're going to replace it with the resin split rail instead of concrete. And actually that extends up Chumash, up Indian Hills and Chumash into the neighborhood because it's falling apart there as well. But yeah, we'll replace the concrete rails with the resin that looks almost the same.
And then the second question I had is the solar for the parking lot. I see it's in the budget, but it's kind of far off. How come?
A couple of reasons. One, and Dan alluded to it, staffing ability to tackle projects. I mean, there's only so many things that we can do at one time, and the irrigation project is going to suck up a lot of oxygen. So it's going to take most of our brain power to get that done. So we tried to phase things out based on what we perceived as priorities, and we met with staff and golf course maintenance, and we kind of phased things out where we thought we could accomplish them based on how things shook out priority-wise.
That makes sense. I'd like to see it sooner, but I understand why. There's only so much you can do at one time.
All right, so the board is good with that. Again, we'll bring that back for final vote on June 15th. Alex, if you could go to the policy consideration slide, please. It's like one of the last slides. So the other items, not asking for decisions on these, there would be opportunity potentially to figure out how to fund the BMX track. We do have the hearing, or we do have the item on June 1st. I'd recommend the board not make any decisions on this until we have that item on June 1st, but something to think about for potentially the final budget as we work through that issue. The other item is, I think I talked to the board, Zach's been working with the new superintendent in Oak Park. We've been talking about, they've asked us actually if we could provide for more sand volleyball courts somewhere in Oak Park. Don't quite know where yet. In consideration of that, we could get more access and reduce costs for tennis and pickleball usage on campus. So I guess my question here is, if we could pull that deal together, would the board be supportive of at least putting money in the budget to plan for more sand volleyball in Oak Park?
I would be. But we have to realize that they're already negative, and so
yeah,
they
do have some fund balance a little bit that we could use for that project. So
I'm open to the idea, but obviously we should go to the park committee and get their feedback.
yeah, I agree. So, but in terms of the funding side, you're open to seriously considering
Yes.
that and
Yeah.
budgeting for it. Okay.
And when it goes to that committee, we should let them know that it came from their
Yeah.
school district, the request.
Then the other item there is, we've talked about the Hummingbird Trailhead. We've got a property owner up there, and also separate apart from the property owner, that trailhead is not, I would say, complete or of quality. It's pretty heavily used. So without making the decision to actually do a new improved trailhead, would the board be supportive of setting aside money to do, if you need me to, I'll give you a little more background. So I've been working with the city in the entryway to the Hummingbird Ranch. The road in there is really narrow, and there's a cul-de-sac at the end of the road before you enter the property. Right now, that is functioning as the trailhead, is the roadway and the cul-de-sac. So they jump out of they park there, they jump out of their cars, and they jump on the trail. We do have a trail parking lot quite a bit below that, down on the left.
On the west side?
So the city is asking us if we'd be willing to kind of make the parking lot and improve the parking lot, maybe make more space. It's dirt now. We could make it a little bit more like the other trailhead parking lots. We could design that so we get efficient parking there, redo the signage, and then we'd move the trailhead parking from off the street into a trailhead parking lot. So I'm working with the city, don't have final decisions. They're also looking at, as a part of that development over there, potentially widening the road. That might meet the need. That being said, I don't know that in that road with that new community there and the Hummingbird, if, do we want the street functioning as our trailhead parking, just as a good neighbor type of thing, so to
They're
speak.
gonna get Quimby.
So my question of you tonight is, if once I work through that, could we potentially, just giving you a heads up, would you be adverse to putting a capital project in to do, wouldn't be a lot, but to enhance and improve that trailhead? Separate and apart from those concerns, it would also be an opportunity for us to develop a nice trailhead parking lot at the location.
We're gonna get Quimby fees from that project.
Are we waiting? The project that's over off of Cuner, where those homes are going in, are there Quimby fees associated with that project?
No.
Why not?
Wayne, if you could come up to
Nelson Chung, the owner of the property, was smart enough to pay these Quimby fees back in the 1980s.
Oh, so we already got Quimby fees.
So he paid less than $100 a lot.
Okay.
So anyhow, again,
So that's
working
only
with the city,
24.
trying to figure out that area of town.
Yeah, and when you say working with the city, does that mean them contributing to it?
No,
And
not
then
at this point.
If we redid the parking lot, would it, besides being a nicer parking lot, would it have more parking?
Potentially, yes. Tom's and Wayne are working on a design for it. Did you add additional spots in there in your, we were kind of in pre-design, but I would think, yes, Tom's already said it will have more parking. Yes.
And then, I know it sounds like an easy decision, like sure, we'll redo the parking lot, but there's a couple considerations. One is, it's significantly far from the trailhead. And if we're gonna say redo the parking lot, I'm good with that. But not at the expense of saying the neighborhood now has the right to park on the street and hikers and bikers cannot. Because that means they just took a public good, and turned it into private parking.
Fair enough.
So if it's overfill parking, if you go there right now and there's nobody parked there, you can park right at the trailhead. If we redo the parking lot down the block, you park down the block so you can walk to the trailhead. It's not that far. But so that the developer who might not have built enough parking spots could count on that parking for his development. So I'd be fine with it if it's open parking, anyone could park there. Hummingbird Ranch sometimes parks there when they have a really large event. So if the public is being inconvenienced, like you have to park down the street to go hiking or biking, but a private enterprise or a new developer is not reserved that parking, I would like it to see it, the way it's usually used is it's overfill parking. So you get there and there's no parking, you got to park down the street. But you wouldn't park down the street on a day when nobody's there. I've been there where it was a beautiful day, I had the hill to myself, I was at the very top and I could see a few miles down my car all by itself and nobody was there. Well, there's no reason at that point to say, well, park down the street, there's nobody there. So I'm open to that part as long as there's not new signs that say no public parking and there's a new sign resident parking only or something. Okay. And then the last part is, I don't want to build a parking lot that's not for park users. So if it's no overnight parking, which I know is our policy anyways, because right across the street at the base of Happy Face Hill, there is no public parking in there as far as I know. They painted every curb red. Well, if they don't have enough parking, they're going to go park in our new parking lot and that we built. So if we have a policy that just says no overnight parking, in the middle of the day, I know we don't have the capacity to figure out who parked there.
I understand the point, yes.
Yeah, then I'd be good with it under those things. I think it'd be an added amenity,
Okay.
but not taking away those other things. So I'm good with exploring and putting it into the budget, and then saying we're doing this with understanding that the rest of it's not being taken away. The developer is good. They just redid between their property and the street. They put in I think it's DG, but like not exactly a sidewalk, but a walking path. So if you're walking down to get to the trailhead, you don't have to walk in the street anymore. So I don't mean to say anything negative about the developer, because they've actually improved it already.
Okay. Good, yes. Agree with the consensus, the comments.
On the BMX track, I know we're not going to discuss it in detail. I wasn't committing to building it and spending the money, just exploring it. And with that, my understanding is they're going to come back with a plan that you could present to us, and they'll have a good team in place before like discussions go too far.
Are you going to bring back my recommendation for the BMX location?
The alternative?
I said it too. I want to look at the extra property we have that's in a little golf course, where we had proposed the big project, and it's there. There's a parking lot, there's a signal, it's our land. We don't have to get a lease for anybody. It's right below the flood control channel. I think it makes sense to me.
We'll probably bring back some alternative locations, so that what we're evaluating is the equestrian center right now. That's what we're
I mean, I don't want maybe we have a conflict with equestrian.
I know, but I was directed to bring back an evaluation of equestrian, but I can bring back, in addition to that, I don't know how much work I'll have, I can bring back some alternative sites that we can
Every time I
potentially
go
use.
by Silloa, I think, there's that raw land.
That we can bring that.
I know the land you're talking about, would the baseball community be upset by it, or is it workable?
You know, you go in, there's a flood control channel, we have all that land.
I'm just thinking like on opening day and a few other events, they use some of that bottom area for parking.
I don't think that would be an issue. And it's not, I mean, it's not that close to adjacent homes. Take a look at it. Drive by. That's all I ask.
I rode my bike by it. I kind of know the area. I'm just wondering the parking issue, but that doesn't mean it's not solvable. That's a few times a year. There's no biking events today because they had overfilled parking or something.
And we had this huge project approved there. That went away because it just didn't make financial sense. But, I mean, I think that's a good spot for the BMX. It's recreation, it's open space. It's not going to bother any equestrian users. It's not that close to house.
Wayne and I'll have a discussion about that and see what we can get back to you as part of the June 1st meeting on the subject.
We had additional items for board members.
Yeah, this is your opportunity if there's things that you guys would like to add to the budget or projects to get done, or.
You had mentioned earlier that third full-time ranger.
Yeah.
And I know that's not a project, but I like that idea because that means it's more community policing. That person knows more and has more knowledge base, and it also enables you to recruit people easier because it's a full-time job.
Yep.
So I do like that idea, and I'm open to that.
Okay.
I got a few more. Just try to take turns.
I am
Good.
I had spoken to Dan previously about it, but our kiosk at our trailheads, a little bit more than just maintenance. So maintenance in my mind is cleaning it up, painting it over. But I would like to just think of what it could be. So I'd like to put that into the budget. So what I'm envisioning is the kiosk at the trailheads. It could be a scout project if it was one of them, but if we're talking about all of them. And I'm thinking something along these lines. They're cleaned up, they're repaired because some of them are needing repair. They're painted. But more than that, the bulletin board, it's two-sided, that we put some thought into what could be on both sides, We need safety signs and stuff. But also in the back, we have already designed the trail guide for each trail. We could blow it up, laminate it, put a graffiti coat on it, and make it so the front of it warns you, but it's not like welcome to the wilderness. Something might eat you or steal your car while you're here. Like, I know we need that, but it can't just be that. So it's welcome to the wilderness, be careful. Also, here's the trail map. Here's some trail groups you could join. So I won't put that into the budget because it requires more than just saying one more thing to maintenance to do with the budget they currently have.
I agree that
explanation
trailhead
for that.
kiosk could use some attention.
There's a few of them where we've like just stuck bulletin boards, like more and more warnings and who to call off to the sides of it. So it's kind of haphazard. And I get why, you press for time, but we put into the budget designing them and upgrading them.
So it would be if the majority of the board wanted to put that in the budget, I could add that in the preliminary, and then those steps of how much or what kind of design it is, we can figure that out later. But if the board supported the request, I could put that in the preliminary budget, and then I'll have a conversation with the staff about how we accomplish the work.
Yeah, I thought it would be a simpler project, but talking to Dan, it's a little bit more than just saying go and paint them. So it requires a little bit of work to design blow up the trail guide and proportion it, laminate it.
To maintain the content in them too, is going to take some staff attention and time. So.
And our goal is that health and physical and mental health, telling our community, here's your trail, because you know you can walk all the way over here, and here's a safe place to go and how to get there. So we want people out there exercising.
I would call it a refurbishment and an enhancement of our kiosks. If not, I think we'll have to look at the actual design of the kiosks. Mr. Miller shared with me, they had done that, I think, over in another part of the county where they had done some really nice kiosks. They could replace the ones they had and put new ones in. So there's that option as well.
Zach, I'd like to see a picture of one of those. I was thinking the same thing.
At conference, they had where you could put it on your phone. You just hold it up, and you can get the trail, and you don't need to make chaos.
Yeah, I can see that where there's a QR code or something right there.
Yeah.
So maybe we should hear rest of Brian's list before we decide on that one.
So the largest slide, no, I'm kidding. We already got that in the design. It's already part of the activity center. So that's pretty much it for my list.
So do I have consensus to put at least budget for kiosk improvements, enhancement?
I think that's a good idea.
You okay with that, Elaine?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I think that's the staff. Did I miss anything? Anything Teresa, Miguel? We've got the direction we need to bring back the final budget or the final preliminary budget on June 15th. All right, I think that concludes the item, Chair.
Sounds good. I will add one thing. I believe when we spoke, after school clubs, the plan is for them to get additional supplies that were not
Yes, I did mention
returned.
that. Good point. So over the course of the last 2.5, 3 years, I asked the staff, because the revenue was down, to really not spend money. So what's happened is our supplies, games, different things in the clubs have degraded, and so this budget includes, I think, about $10,000 per club, maybe a little less, to really get our materials back and our clubs back up to what our expectation is.
Yeah, and I know it's a small thing, but when
It's a big
the
number.
clubs do that, I think it would be advisable for us to advertise that on social media or however we can to highlight we are invested in our after-school clubs. And I think that goes the same for many of these projects. Not all of them are, worthy of Facebook or going to, be a highlight reel. But I think there are some of these items in here that we can highlight. We're making improvements, we're making repairs. Look how great the Park District is doing.
Thank you for mentioning that. It's on the capital list, but I didn't mention that, yes. And we will follow up on that as well.
Elaine, any other comments? Brian, you said yours are good? Okay. That concludes that item. That takes us to item 6 of new business. Item B, approval of resolution 2031 of the intention to levy assessments for fiscal year 22-23, preliminary approving engineer's report, and providing for notice of hearing.
Ms. Pennington will provide the report, and our assessment district engineer, Suzanne Barnes, is available to the board for any questions. Is Susan presenting also, or just questions?
Susan's on the line. Thank you for sticking with us this evening, Susan. And the assessment has been discussed at length this evening. The item before you is just to approve the preliminary engineer's report and to authorize the publishing of the legal notice. And then once that takes place, we'll come back June 1st for the public hearing. So there's just two steps involved here, the engineer's report and then the legal notice. And Susan is here this evening if you guys have any specific questions.
Any board questions? I am good. Any public comment? I'm not seeing anyone in the audience. Is there anyone on Zoom who would like to make a comment?
Move approval of staff's recommendation.
I will second. Can we get roll call?
Director Dennert,
Yes.
Vice Chair Craig,
Aye.
Director Freeman.
Yes.
The motion carries with a unanimous vote with Director Avalon, Chair O'Brien absent.
Okay.
Chair, I might recommend that we do 8 and 9 on the agenda before the closed session.
I think that's a
The
good
public
idea.
that wants to hear 8 and 9.
Yes.
Yeah.
I will do closed
Should
session.
have done that, yeah.
That will take us to item 8, reports by board members. Director Freeman, would you like to start?
I have two meetings, both with CARPD Legislative Committee and CSTA Legislative Meeting. One was on Thursday and the other one on Friday. Both very thorough. I know that sometimes you may wonder why we pay attention to these legislative committee meetings. An example was at CARPD, it's Assembly Bill 1737. And if this bill were to be passed and approved, it would make after school day camps impossible for us to put on it because of the requirement for a healthcare person on duty. I mean, the author, I think, has probably good intentions, but not understanding the actual implementation of how it would work. Unfortunately, Dan was on there, and I think he's going to be part of a group discussion. I brought it up at CSTA on Friday, and they'll be contacting CARPD, working together to try to educate the assemblyman on how it actually works.
And if you guys can reach out to, it requires some extra staffing and a large amount in our day camps. That would be extremely detrimental to being able to operate those camps at the prices we have now. So if you guys talk to our local contingent and make them aware of our concern with that bill would be helpful.
Do we have any information packets that?
Yeah, I'll get something out to the board.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Thank you.
I mean, I think the author must have had a situation or something as well, meaning, but in the end, it's not going to be good. That's it.
Thank you. Director Denner.
I saw the Mother's Day post that the staff did on social media with our logo and all. It looked really good. I really like that. This weekend at Sunday, normally we hike really early in the morning to clean up trails, but a student group is doing it, and they asked for a Sunday at 4 p.m. And I thank the staff, especially Zach, for working out the details for that. And I appreciate being able to get that done in a quick turnaround. They're doing their Reagan Citizen Scholar Institute Diploma Seal project. That's a part of Royal Reagan, the Reagan Library working together. And they've already done it a few times. They invited Mike Kuhn to speak to students. They were in the Acorn for their cleanup efforts, so they're going to do that Sunday. And Paul was here earlier, but Nikki and Paul, Zach, your whole department. I was trying to get a number earlier, but the service projects that we've done between Martin Luther King, Earth Day, and the trail cleanups, the last few years have been hundreds of volunteers, like hundreds of new volunteers that weren't with us in the past. So that was just impressive that they're processing all that, and but they keep coming back. Because a lot of people volunteer one time and they realize what's involved, but they keep coming back as a compliment towards our staff of how easy it is to do and the fun they're having. I spoke to some ideas about trash cleanup and volunteer groups with others. Zach, I might be reaching out to you later with some details about that. And then a community member had posted on Facebook asking about classes for students or kids that were 5 and under, and their concern was the scheduling of them was primarily during the day. And I have my own thoughts of why they're home during the day, and I think my thoughts are correct on it. But when we put together like the reporter with our schedule of classes, and we do them 5 and under during the day, Zach, I didn't give you time to like research it, but can you give me a quick heads up? What would you say our answer to that part is? I'm gonna guess that I have the same answers as you, but you're a professional at this.
Well, without going into complete detail, I would surmise that most of the time those are stay-at-home parents with toddlers that have the opportunity to come to our centers during the day when we have room availability and other staff that's able and willing to teach. Evening and weekend classes tend to be more heavy with after-school programs, older kids, and adult age classes at most of our facilities. Not to say we couldn't offer some evening programs, but I think traditionally, historically, they've worked best when they've been offered during the day for those families that are able to come, with their little ones that aren't in school.
That's what I was guessing. It's also just thinking when my kids were young, after because the parents' concern was for working parents, and I was just thinking once it's 5 or 6 o'clock and a kid's 5 or under, it's kind of like wind down time. Sometimes have activities. I looked at the report and there was a few here and there, but I think that's a response I can give to them. Thanks for that. And then the month of June is Pride Month. We have celebrated in the past by posting on social media a message with a rainbow saying that the National Recreation Park Association had an inclusive message and that we want all people in our parks. And we do that, and the reason I bring it up to this time is because we've done it in the past and received a good reception. It's just Pride Month starts on June 1st, so if we could do it in the beginning of the month, so it's not like we're catching up, we're just doing it in the beginning. When I saw that the first time, I felt really good seeing that, knowing that it's our community saying that we support each other and we're there for each other. So I want to do that all month long. That's it for me.
Thank you. I will tack on to the Pride Month thing, supporting that, but also encouraging if there ends up being a Pride event in one of our parks and there's possibility for a booth, or if we can examine possibilities of other ways of support outside of social media, either raising a rainbow flag, or I know the city has discussed, I can't recall if they did it, but utilizing some of their lights in that fashion to celebrate the month.
They did, they lit up the sign outside of City Hall.
Perfect, see. And so I'd be absolutely open to any ideas from staff or anyone else on how else we can celebrate the month, but I would absolutely support recognizing Pride Month near, hopefully the June 1st, but near the beginning of the month rather than catching up on it later. Besides that, I will say I had a member of the community of the Simi Valley Cultural Arts Center reach out, interested if we had capacity for a partnership with rec classes. They might have instructors for performing arts in other areas that don't necessarily have the space to host classes, and that there was interest in at least hosting classes in some of our parks and the amphitheaters. So I can happily put staff in touch.
I'm sure that's different than the Culture Arts Festival.
That is different.
Okay, so we have a meeting set up with her, but this is in addition to that.
This is in addition
okay,
to
good,
that. I had someone
send
reach
us
out.
along the name and we'll
Yeah,
put it in.
concern to me and I'll forward it to the appropriate staff.
Perfect, thank you. I am excited for Arts Fest. I know I was talking about that a lot at the street fair, encouraging people to go. Hopefully I can be there, but I do want to commend staff on setting that up, and I hope it is a roaring success.
Sure, if I could, that's one that we're starting this year. We hope that becomes successful and we can grow that event.
Absolutely. And then, sorry, I lost my place. Yeah, I'll end by saying thank you for the the birthday letter, and there are some cupcakes back here. So thank you, I appreciate that. That concludes my report. Item number 9, report by district manager.
Thank you, Chair. I have no items of concern to report regarding the skate park, nor COVID. Things going pretty good and stable right now. As the board is aware, we had a significant water pipe break at the community center, and it looks like the long-term damage is confined to the gym. So that's, I guess, the good news part of it. So we had a copper pipe in the wall behind in the kitchen break in a period when we didn't have staff there. Nobody saw it for a day or two and a couple nights, and it completely flooded. Now the downside is the way that the wood floor is constructed, it infiltrated the entire gym floor because there's a gap in there, and the floor is wood and all of that. We're in contact with our insurer. Early indications are it will be a covered damage item. We are evaluating working with the insurer because they're interested in the cost and how they got to determine the loss and all of that. So with that, they'll be sending some consulting help down to help us scope what we might need to do with the gym floor. I will also say it's going to significantly impact our programs. The timing was horrible because this was the year we were hoping to get back to normal. And we had a whole slew of summer camps, volleyball league, basketball league. The staff has had some success, and the school district's great. They're giving us the opportunity to use their gyms to the full extent that we can. Probably won't happen until the schools are out. And then we're evaluating some alternatives. So we're on that. But it's looking like that gym floor is, I talked to the attorney. We're probably going to do at least probably both steps. Well, step 1 is getting the floor out of there and cleaning it all up under emergency procurement processes. And then secondly, we need to get the floor back and constructed as quickly as possible. That facility does serve as a Red Cross shelter. It's the designated shelter in the event of emergencies. So not only do we need to get it out, we also need to get the floor back to usable, so if we are in the event of having an emergency, we have that. So the idea is I will be bringing you an item on June 1st, likely, to authorize emergency services procedures to get that floor repaired. And we will be working with the insurer. I think we've already had some suppliers looking at it. I would expect they'll be down here the next day or two to give us a full scope of what might need to be done. I am aware Wayne talked to a supplier, and the lead time for getting a new gym floor is 60 to 90 days. The wood, if we can even get it then. So emergency procurement will allow us to order the floor as soon as we possibly can. But again, supply issues and all those things with that type of product. So that's about what we know now. I'll probably know quite a bit more on the scope of the project and the time frame of when it couldn't be done in the next week or so, I hope so.
Since it's just the gym floor, does that mean that the rooms can be still rented out?
Yes, the rooms it's looking like all the rooms are still going to be okay. So we have concrete and tile flooring in there. It's a brick building, so the water didn't go into drywall and other areas. It did get into the carpet in the office building, so that we had to replace the carpet in the office we have there for the staff. And then so it looks like the long-term damage or even the short-term is really confined to the gym. The floor is buckling, it's full of moisture. If you want to go take a look at it, and you can see what the water damage does to wood floors, feel free to stop by.
Still use the room.
Yeah, and we're frantically trying to find space to keep our classes going to the extent we can. So.
For our classes, I know it's gym facilities, but there's other types of classes. And I know you said wait for the summer for some of those for the schools to be not full of students. How open is the school district to allowing us to use their schools during the summer? Like, does that allow most of the leagues to go on, but just maybe not the location we wanted?
Yeah, so our preliminary discussions with the school have been very, very welcoming. They've been great. They've offered us up to 3 gyms already that could potentially be used for a variety of classes. So we might need to be moving around a little bit, kind of bouncing around a little bit, depending on the the sport, the night, obviously, and whether or not some of our equipment is compatible with those gyms, like the volleyball poles and things of that nature. So we're trying to evaluate that right now. Apollo Gym, Sinaloa Gym, and Valley View Gym are the 3 primary gyms we're looking at this point, or gotten preliminary approval to use. That being said, obviously the high school gyms are very impacted with their own sports programs. They're very difficult to find any gym time in. And when the school year starts, obviously the PE component and the school use will ramp back up. So the faster we can get on this project, obviously the better, because going into the fall, we don't really have a guarantee yet what gyms we might be able to use in the fall, but the school has been very accommodating with us, moving very quickly to get us some temporary kind of locations going.
And sometimes when you replace things, you just replace it with like, is there any need or discussion that we should upgrade it? I mean, while we're replacing it?
The floor we had was of probably the highest quality, so it's a like for like, but the quality we had was a high quality, so Wayne tells me it was a very good surface and floor in the grading of gymnasium floors. So I would like to replace it at that same high quality.
Knowing that there's a lot more information to be learned, is it possible we just looked at a lot of capital projects, that this impacts those capital projects?
Most of the capital projects we had defined for the community center were not related to the floor, so a lot of it was wall work, ceiling work, acoustic panels, things of that nature, which I think could still go forward on a normal schedule if they're allocated in the budget. So the open gym, the impact of the community is really that daily use. I think
Sure.
That's not only our revenue generating programs, but just the people that drop in to play volleyball and basketball. So
Yeah.
we will prioritize kind of the summer camps, the sports camps, the leagues. If we can find more openings for open gym opportunities as well, we'll be trying to do that with the school district over the summer as well. But yes, that is a very impacted gym 6 to 7 days a week, and so it's not going to be easy to find replacements for all those programs, but we're gonna make our best effort to do that.
Right, I mentioned the audit. I'll keep you guys informed of how that's going, of the COVID relief funds we've received. I wanted to note Jason Poplinsky, they're having a retirement issue dinner for him. The board had previously given direction to provide some recognition to him, so Sandy has created a nice framed plaque. So if any of you are going to that event, I'd like to provide you with the plaque. If any of you are going, you can present it to Jason at that event if you'd like. I'm not sure if I'm going or not. So Brian, are you going?
I'm going, are you?
I plan on going.
So Brian, I'll give it to you, and then if there's more board members there, we can do a group thing.
Yeah, we could all go up
Yeah.
and hand a plaque.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll bring it and we'll all go up, whoever's there.
There is a funding opportunity for the Arroyo Phase 5. So Caltrans, California Transportation Commission, has the active transportation program. And so we're going to be meeting with the city staff to coordinate the cities eligible for it, this particular source. But the city's going to step up and potentially put together an application with consultation from us and support from Wayne's group for getting money for Phase 5 of the Arroyo, which is beyond Phase 4 that's in design right now. So that'll be exciting. If
Is that Phase 5 going to Cuno or going to Moore Is that Phase 5?
Phase 5, no, it goes from, so the new phase is going to go to Tapo. This will go from Tapo to Stearns. Tapo to Stearns.
We're getting there.
Yep. So yeah, we're not planning to go to Moore Park at all yet at all. We got 2 more phases to get that way, and then we'll come back and have a conversation about what's next.
When we talked to the city, I'd emphasize that bicycling is increasing rapidly, especially e-bikes.
Yeah.
And the reason I mention it is there's more and more e-bikes riding through traffic. And if we could direct them to the Arroyo, I think many people would be happier than down Alamo or Cochrane. I've ridden e-bike and a traditional bike on Alamo. And I know there's a bike lane, but I'd still prefer to be on a covered lane. So I don't know if we've given serious consideration to it as a community, but in a few years, e-bikes are going down in price. They're getting more reliable. More people are trying them. I'm just imagining the traffic less there's about to be. So if we just mention, hey, the Arroyo can help us direct it towards it. That'd be
good.
good.
That's a good point. And then lastly, I did attend or represent us at the city council meeting on Monday night when they did their water restrictions until about 11:30 p.m. because it was the last item on the agenda, of course. But they did include in their resolution recognition of functional turf, parks, athletic fields, which would include golf. That being said, there is an expectation that we try to do all we can to reduce water consumption this summer. So separate turf removal is not going to happen by this summer, but Wayne and I are going to go through and look at different heads and different areas that you would call completely non-functional or maybe completely just ornamental, and we will probably cut back on our water use in those areas. Haven't been through that analysis yet, so we did get the exception. The challenge for the city is that when they let us use more water, the city is still held to an American unit. So the city more broadly still needs to meet the targets from MWD and CAGUS. So they didn't give us more water when they gave us the exemption. They just said, oh yeah, you can water parks, but city, you still have to save in other areas. That's why we need to do our part in the other areas that you might consider less functional or non-functional
So
too.
like neighborhood parks, you might cut the water.
No, it's defined as recreation space. They're working on the definitions, but it's active park area. It even says if you have a picnic or something. So we're going to be looking at any like medians in our parking lots. We'll be looking on the edges of parks that you wouldn't picnic in. It would be, you know, those strictly visible, you know, the areas where people are playing frisbee and maybe having a picnic or, you know, laying down a blanket, it's all defined as functional. So we'd be looking at those areas that are really not used pretty much and seeing how much that is, and then telling the city that we will not water those or cut those areas back. Wayne and I got to go through that, but there is an expectation that with the, you know, with the consideration or the exemption that we do our part on the rest of the areas. So we will have areas of our parks that are going to be near dead this summer. So. And that concludes, next, I didn't bring, we don't have any committee meetings scheduled other than historical. And our next meeting is on June 1st. We have the assessment district coming back for that decision, and then the BMX track item on June 1st. June 15th will be the preliminary budget. I'll probably add drones that night because we've kind of been through the budget and spent a lot of time on it tonight. We may add drones that look at the drone ordinance again and kind of moving forward with making the revisions the board had asked us to do. And I think that's it for the next couple of meetings, and that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you very much. That takes us back to item 7, closed session.
I think we announced now if we're going to adjourn out of now we're going to adjourn out of closed session. Yeah.
Do we?
So we're going to adjourn out of closed session, and we won't be back in open session. Yeah.
Do we have any legal counsel here?
We do not.
So should I read the items?
You close the door. There's little bugs coming in.
Chair, I can do that if you'd like, or you can.
Yes, please.
The board is now going to convene in closed session pursuant to the items on the agenda. Closed session pursuant to Government Code 54956.7. Several categories of labor relations and negotiations. The employee organization, Rancho Simi Recreation Park District Middle Management Association, the Rancho Simi Employees Association, the Maintenance and Grounds Association, and the unrepresented employees, or the designated employee organizations, and the agency negotiators, or the district manager and the director of administration. I don't expect we'll have anything to report out of closed session.
We still have to remember, there it goes.
Thank you, everyone who attended.